Today we're venturing deep into the heart of Texas, where the land is as vast as its legends and just as terrifying. From eerie lights haunting dark rivers to ancient forces that never should have been disturbed, get ready for 7 creepiest true encounters on empty Texas backroads that will make you question what's real and what's lurking just beyond the horizon. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now. Because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now let's dive into the darkness. I don't scare easy on Texas roads. I grew up on them, riding shotgun while my dad hauled feed out to customers, later running parts for a mechanic in Presidio, and eventually doing late-night drops for the hardware store when someone's pump gave up. FM 170, the river road that snakes along the Rio Grande from Presidio toward Lajitas and Terlingua, was never just a line on a map to me. It was a narrow ribbon tucked into mesas and thorn, a place where the night felt huge and old and personal. People worry about cartel traffic or border patrol checkpoints out here, but what most of us worry about is simpler. The drop-offs, the blind curves, mule deer that leap out like they want to ride shotgun, the sudden wind that slaps your truck sideways hard enough to make you pray. That Thursday in late September, it was a relief to finally leave the glare of Presidio's streetlights and push into the dark, where the land opens up, and you can see the Milky Way like river silt shaken across the sky. I had a late start because the kid who was supposed to load the concrete sealer called in sick, so I did it myself, and then hung around too long griping about football with Mrs. Salazar at the register. The Panthers were away the next night, and she wanted to know if I was driving up to Alpine to watch. And I told her I'd settle for the radio because the old Ford didn't like long climbs with a full bed. I topped off at the last station, grabbed a couple of foil-wrapped burritos that tasted like onion sweet heaven, and pointed the F-150 east. The cab smelled like vinyl, dust, and a faint, clean tang of the concrete sealer. My hands still had the chalky feel you get when the stuff dries on your skin. The air through the vent was warm but thinning as the desert gave up the day's heat. Somewhere over in Ojinaga, a dog started up, and then a whole chain of them answered. Off the shoulder, Ocotillo stems showed black against the paler black of the sky, and every once in a while a chunk of Rio Grande flashed like a smudge of oil under the stars. There's a rhythm to FM 170 you learn if you drive it often, the little dips that can hide a cow, the way a wind from the river pushes under the truck like a hand, the runoff sand that piles in a corner where you don't expect it. I kept it a few miles under the limit because I wanted to eat the first burrito while it was still hot, and because what's the point of hurrying if you end up in a mesquite stand waiting for a tow that won't come till morning? No cell service out there, not reliably. You measure time by mile markers and the whine of tires on chip seal, by the cricket noise coming through a cracked window, by the way your lights climb the hill ahead and slide down the other side. The first sign of the headlights was just that, light, 2 small steady points where there had been none. I saw them come up over a rise behind me in the mirror, the right kind of far apart, yellowish the way older sealed beams look, and I finished the last bite of burrito, wadded the foil, and set it in the cup holder, figuring I'd let the driver pass. Nobody likes to be stuck behind a cautious pickup on the river road at night. I blipped my hazards twice to say go ahead on the next straight. The lights held where they were, unbothered. I put the left tires to the line to show I knew they were there. The lights held. Okay, I thought, Border Patrol. They tail you out here, especially if you're a lone truck heading toward Terlingua with a loaded bed and your plate's still dusty enough to hide last year's sticker. Or maybe it was some local who liked that distance. The lights weren't aggressive, no high beams, no weird weaving. They just followed. I told myself not to assign a personality to them. It's a trick of driving alone in open dark. You begin to feel watched by the road itself. The lights rose and fell with the terrain, comforting in their normality. When I slowed for a tight right-hand curve, they slowed. When I sped up on the long downslope that runs past the river road's big open shelf, they stayed where they were, maybe 600-700 feet back. It took a while before I noticed the first odd thing. On most nights when a car follows you, their beams will throw a little light onto the scrub or the rock edges, into your mirror, across any cattle guard slats you cross. The light has spill. These didn't. They reached me as 2 points, steady and round, not flaring on the glass, not sketching out the curve of my side mirror. I checked the mirror, then the other, then the rear window. Same. 2 points that looked like headlights but threw no corridor of white at the asphalt, no amber lick along reflectors. I lifted my foot without meaning to and felt the pickup drag, back a little. The lights matched, not gaining, not falling. I told myself the road's angles were playing tricks, the way the grade hides glare and makes it seem like a car is floating. A mile later, I pulled into one of the river overlooks, one of those gravel half-moons with a low rock wall where folks take pictures in daylight, and I put my hazards on and waited. I didn't get out. It's not that I was scared. I just didn't want to deal with any surprise conversations. If it was Border Patrol, they'd tap my window and ask the usual questions, then I could go. If it was nobody official, better to let them pass and taillight their way out of my night. The lights came up the grade and then dipped, then rose, again, and then they stopped, not 20 yards from the mouth of the turnout. Not a nose poked in, not a human silhouette behind glass, just the two lights waiting at the turnoff of the turnoff. We sat like that long enough for my hazards to start irritating me, their steady click, click, click sounding too loud in the cab. I switched them off, expecting the other driver to take it as his signal to move along. The lights went out. I caught my own face ghosted in the rear glass and nothing else. I waited. Crickets. The river doing what it always does in the dark, sliding past without showing itself. I put the truck in drive, wheels crunching the gravel slow so I could nose back out. As my headlights reached the road, the 2 points kindled again behind me, already in motion, keeping distance as if we'd agreed. "All right," I said aloud, because sometimes you need to hear your own voice to keep thoughts in order. "All right, it's an old ranch truck with crummy low beams. Maybe the alternator is iffy and the guy's nursing it. Maybe he's messing with me. Maybe this is nothing." I felt foolish for having stopped. I put the second burrito on the dash to keep warm a bit longer. Took a sip of Big Red, put on the radio to catch static layered with a station out of Marathon playing classic country cut with a Spanish-language preacher who was half-song himself, and let the road settle its hands around the truck again. Between Presidio and Lajitas, the land is all long bones and brush. Mesas stack like someone laid the world down in slabs. The road squeezes itself alongside the Rio Grande and climbs up out of it and dives back in like it can't make up its mind. Somewhere out there is the fake town from that old movie set, the remnants of it anyway, and farther along there's the big drop that gives folks vertigo in daylight. Every few miles a white memorial cross shows itself in your beams, sometimes with plastic flowers sun-bleached to the color of bones. At one, I saw a little saint statue with a votive cup next to it, a glass jelly jar half full of wax. It had a black wick, and for half a second I thought I saw ember red inside it, as if someone had just now plucked out a match. But when I looked hard, it was glass and nothing more. When I checked the mirror after, the two lights were calm as ever, like eyes that don't have to blink. I tried slowing to 30, then 25, and tapping my brake a touch. The lights fell back the exact same amount, and then eased back, up the exact same amount when I did, like we were tied together by some measured rope. I sped to 60 on a stretch where a person with any sense keeps it at 50, and the Ford let me know, with that tremor in the wheel that says your front end could use fresh bushings, that I was being dumb. The lights matched dumbness for dumbness, steady. I felt a stick of cold run down my arms and thought, if this is Border Patrol, they are either bored or they don't want me to stop again. But even thinking that felt like forcing a normal template onto something that wanted to be nameless. Once a Border Patrol Tahoe came the other direction, its grill wearing that blocky face that looks both friendly and ready to body slam you. I flash my lights to say hello like we do out here. The Tahoe rolled by slow. The agent looked at me and lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in that casual West Texas salute, and the moment he passed my truck, the radio went dead and the 2 lights behind me winked out like someone had pinched them. I watched my mirrors for a minute. Nothing behind but road signed with reflectors. I almost pulled over to wave the Tahoe around and make a report about, not quite harassment, not quite a prank, but it was already gone, and the night closed over the space where it had been. Then my radio came back with the tail end of a Willie Nelson song and somebody laughing on the Spanish station. That open-throated laugh men use when they're tired and happy to be talking to anyone at all. The 2 lights rose again behind me, like they'd just decided to be real. I kept telling myself versions of normal, dust in the mirrors, reflections of my own taillights off something, heat lightning off to the south. Marfa has its lights, we all talk about them, and the stories fold and unfold in diners and gas stations until some of them settle into your mind as true whether or not they ever happened. My dad had a story about a night on 1 and 18 when he saw a man standing on the center line with a lantern, and when he eased by, the lantern light made a band around his chest like a reflector and then wasn't there. He always ended that story by laughing at himself. "The road will make a fool of you if you ask it to," he'd say, which was his way of being practical about things that don't have practical answers. A set of curves came up like a short song I knew by heart. A downshift, a feather of brakes, careful, the sand collects here. A blind left with rock close on your right. A short straight where the river is a darker dark to your left. Then the big right that spits you toward a long hill. My hands, steady, till then, were damp on the wheel. The burrito unwrapped itself in a soft onion smell and I let it sit because my stomach had backed away from appetite without asking me first. I reached to adjust the mirror. Not because it needed adjustment, but because my fingers wanted something mundane to do. And in that extra second of looking at the glass, the 2 lights did something I still can't name. They separated a little and rose. Not like a car cresting, not like a truck hitting a bump, but like a pair of eyes being lifted by a person's face when they stand. Then they drifted a foot to the right together, then a foot to the left, a small loose sway. And in the sway there was no road cadence, nothing that matched the broken pavement, nothing that tied to the yaw of my own movement. I braked without permission from my better sense, and for the first time that night my tires chirped as if a hand had squeezed them. The lights matched, stopping in a way that suggested nothing mechanical had made them stop. I watched for the shape of a grille, the chrome line on a hood, the bar shadows that make the face of a car. The lights hung in their own small piece of night. Maybe I could have kept driving and told myself later it was some ranch kid messing with me using a quad bike under blackout, an LED rig faked through a shop project. Maybe I could have made that stick in my head. Instead, I eased over until I felt the washboard rattle of shoulder gravel. I put my hazards on because I wanted the human code on my truck, red and amber blink that says, not a deer, not a stray cow, not an empty wreck. Someone here is thinking and wants you to think too. The clicking filled the cab. I killed the engine. At once, the night poured in, a cool that had been waiting for its cue. Crickets, the brush scratching itself in the breeze. Somewhere far, 100 miles or 1 mile, it's hard to tell it. Night out here? A train horn did that long, mournful note followed by the short that sounds like answer. It made me think of my dad again, the way he'd beat time on the wheel with 2 fingers to every train like even the machines needed a little company. I left my seatbelt on and leaned back to try to see around my hoarded junk. 2 bungee cords, a coil of baling wire, a jacket that never leaves the truck. The glass showed a soft watercolor of me in my cab. Beyond that, the 2 lights were small as coins held at arm's length. I realized then what had been nagging me. Normally, headlights catch the faint shine on the strip of tar right hand of the center line, the little flecks of quartz in the roadbed that answer even a dim beam. These lights made no such glitters. The world between them and me stayed itself. Only the points were changed. When I opened my door, the dome light put its small circle of yellow on the shoulder gravel, and then dimmed itself the way dome lights do to be polite. The light from behind didn't bloom or flatten out or glare. on the door edge. I stepped down, my boots crunching, the kind of pretty sound you only hear when you're alone enough to notice it. The wind slid the ocotillo a bit and made the dry stems knock each other like someone gently clapping. The river kept its counsel. "All right," I said again, and I meant it as a hello and as a treaty. "Go on. I'll wait." I held up an open hand. I was suddenly aware of how much I didn't want those lights any closer. The hairs on my arms rose the way they do when a crackle of electricity is near, when you shuffle in socks in winter and reach for a doorknob. The lights did not move. The road had the thick quiet you get where sound doesn't know what to echo off of, and in that quiet the clicking of my hazards sounded like someone tapping their nail on a tabletop. I don't know how long we stood. The moon had not yet lifted itself over the mesas, and the stars had all the brightness they get out here on a clear night in fall. I thought, weirdly, about Friday night football and the way the field lights make a little town glow if you see it from the highway. I thought about the Saint candle in the jelly jar and the wick that wasn't glowing. I felt foolish. Finally, I climbed back in the truck, and the second I pulled the door shut, the dome light flared brighter than it should have, as if my truck had coughed flame under the dash and then dropped to black. The two headlights behind scooted an inch closer without crossing any of the space between. That was enough to put the key in motion. The Ford started easy, she always did. I pulled back onto the road like a person who'd never once heard of hesitation. The lights followed, easy as breath. The climb up Big Hill is where the road shows you the river wide and far, the kind of view that makes even natives go quiet in daytime. At night you get a different kind of grand, a sense that the earth is moving under you slow as plate tectonics, while you are just a brief problem rolling along its skin. I kept the truck steady and tried to think dumb, tried to put my mind in a place where things like this, if they were a prank, couldn't find a handle. It helped for a bit. The lights stayed back. My hands found their rhythm. I passed another memorial, a simple white cross with Marcos painted on it in black, the paint thick where the brush turned and came back, and I felt the old Ford lift a fraction as it rolled over where the shoulder had been patched. When I checked the mirror, the lights had done that stand-up motion again, and then a sway that made my mouth go dry. The realization about the car not being there came strangely late. I had been busy with the feelings and missed the obvious. On a long straight, my own headlights made a clean lane ahead, revealing the reflective studs and the faint ghost of oil ground deep into the middle. If there had been a car behind me, even at that distance, its beams would have made lines on the road, would have pushed a pale at the edges of my mirror. There was none. I turned the mirror with my hand, angling it in a way that would catch a hood line if there was one. Two lights hung in a place that had no hood. I cut my headlights for one count, then put them back. Not wise, but I was testing the world. And in that black one count, the 2 points held like stars you see with your eyes shut. When my lights returned, they had not changed their place, even the width of a cattle guard bar. After that I talked. Not prayer exactly, just talk. About work. About Mrs. Salazar and the way she always remembers who played quarterback in any given season. About my dad and his old lantern man on 118. About burritos and the mystery of why foil keeps everything tasting like the best version of itself. I told the night I wasn't mad, and that I was going to keep my lane, and that if the lights wanted to ride my tail to Terlingua, I would prefer they do it in silence. I felt crazy and also more sane than I had in a long time, like a person giving instructions to stubborn cattle. The lights kept their religion. At the Barton Warnock side of things, where the land softens and the notion of town begins to dream itself into being, a wind came up off the river like somebody had opened a door a long way down a hallway. It made the ocotillo knock harder and carried with it that faint smell of dust wet with dew before the dew has actually come, just a promise of it. I breathed it, and for a second it felt like the night had let go. I started to think I could look back and see nothing, that I'd crest the next hill and whatever was back there would have decided it had escorted me enough. I checked the mirror because that's what we do, even when we tell ourselves not to. And the two lights were closer than they had been. Not feet closer, but some measurable way that made my throat tighten. The Ford's dash clock said 2:13, though I had watched it be 12:58 not 20 minutes ago. I slapped the clock with the back of my hand like that would fix time. On the left, down a little slope, two fresh crosses stood together, the ground at their feet not yet settled. Someone had left sunflowers that had kept their yellow even in the pale wash of my beams. The two lights behind me seemed to catch that yellow and pull it in, as if color were a thing they could take. And for a second, the sunflowers looked gray. It could have been my eyes, it could have been nothing. When I looked again, the yellow was yellow. I pulled into the lot of a little store that keeps odd hours and sells more beer than groceries and acts as a post office on Tuesdays because why not? The gravel had the kind of ruts you don't see unless you visit the same places over and over. My truck's tires found the old paths automatically. The store itself was dark, the kind of dark that shows you a Coke machine and your own headlights reflected off a smudged window and nothing else. I idled there and watched the two lights stop at the entrance to the lot. It felt like a line had been drawn in gravel. I put the Ford in park and sat with my hands on the wheel, and after a minute the dome light made that little attempt at kindness again. Flared, settled. Somewhere deep in the truck, a relay clicked like a thought. I reached to kill the lights, entirely, and then didn't. The 2 points waited patient as cows at a fence line. It ended without ending, which is how these things go. I pulled back out and drove the last miles with a steadiness I'm not sure I own in the daylight. The desert on either side did its desert breathing. The wind had a thin edge to it that speaks of dawn a long way off. Somewhere far behind, the two lights, if they were behind, kept their distance like polite company. When the first proper streetlight lifted itself on a pole at the edge of Terlingua, the kind that hums and buzzes with bugs in summer, I checked the mirror and saw only my own cab and the road, and the thought of the river. I took the right toward the ghost town ruins because I always do, not for ghosts, but because it gives me a second to turn down the noise in my head before I go where people might be. I parked by the little bar where you can sit out and hear talk about mines and tourists and rain in the same 10 minutes, killed the engine, and listened. Crickets. A coyote way off making that yip-yip that ends in a laugh. The thinnest thread of a train horn again, which made no sense and all the sense in the world. My hands smelled like dust and onion and something like hot pennies. I went in and ordered coffee because it felt like a sober thing to do, and the guy behind the counter poured it so black it looked like a hole in the cup. There were two other people in there, a woman with trail dust still on her shins and a man with the posture of someone who sleeps in his truck more often than he tells anyone. Nobody made a big deal of me, which was perfect. I told the bartender, the short version, because that is what we do here too. We tell a short version and wait for someone to nod or laugh or mention what we didn't think to include. He listened and didn't smile. You get the never passers, he said, like he was naming a weather pattern. It happens. If they pass you, you don't make the curve, so they don't pass. That's a hell of a thing to say, I said, because it was. It's a hell of a road, he said. He rinsed the pot and set it back on the burner with the habit of someone who could do it blind. Sometimes they ride you to town. Sometimes they quit at Big Hill. Sometimes you don't see them till you look back. Don't look back so much. The coffee tasted like it had been made by someone who keeps bad company on purpose. It was perfect. I sat there until my shoulders unclenched themselves and my hands remembered to be hands. When I went back out, the night had softened by a degree or two, and my truck looked like a thing I knew again. On the rear window, not on the outside where dust lies, but inside, on the glass where fingers don't usually go, two small ovals showed themselves in the dew that had started to gather. They could have been where I leaned with my greasy thumb and forefinger to twist the mirror once. They could have been nothing. When I rubbed them with the edge of my sleeve, they didn't go, exactly. They just smeared into the idea of themselves, and then settled back as if the glass remembered better than I did. On the drive home a day later in sun as frank and hard as a truth you don't want, that stretch of road was just a stretch of road. The memorial crosses looked like they always do, resolute and tending to their own business. The jelly jar by the saint had a new wick a 1/4 inch long, clean white. A Border Patrol Tahoe came up behind me and passed with a wave. The world experienced itself as the world, which is another way of saying we don't get to keep the odd things even if we want to. Still, nights later, rolling the other direction with the radio catching a game and the voice of a man excited about a play that had gone wrong and right at the same time. I felt my eyes pulled to the mirror out of habit. For a second, just the shortest second between mile markers, I thought I saw 2 coins of light in the back window. Not out on the road, but quieter and nearer than that. As if they'd found a way to ride closer, or as if they'd always been there and I had learned finally how to see them. I know what I would say if you told me this story. I would tell you about heat shimmers and old eyes and how the brain hates the straight line of a desert night and will find a face in any 2 points you give it. I would pat the seat beside me and offer you a burrito and turn the radio up and tell you it's nothing to worry about as long as you drive your speed and keep your lane and don't go looking for trouble in the rear view. But I also know the weight in my hands when I gripped the wheel and the way the wind in the Ocotillo sounded like a person reminding you softly, gently, to keep going. I know the feeling of a thing that has decided not to pass because passing would mean an ending, and some endings the road will not allow. So I don't look back as much anymore. Not because I'm braver, because if the headlights are there, and if they want to keep their distance, I'd rather let them. Some nights the desert rides with you. Some nights you count that as luck. And some nights, like that one, you understand that not everything behind you is behind you, and that the longest 30 miles of your life can fit between 2 small coins of light that never once draw close enough to show you the shape they belong to. I've always driven late at night. It's the quiet, I think. The way the roads in Texas stretch out forever under the stars, the air thick with cicadas, and the hum of the tires against the blacktop giving me something to focus on. That night, I was coming back from visiting a buddy in Bryan, taking Highway 21 back toward Bastrop. It's a 2-lane highway most of the way, lined with mesquite and cedar, and every few miles you hit a faded gas station with one light still buzzing over the pumps. It was about 1:30 in the morning when I saw her. She was standing right by the shoulder where the old iron bridge crosses the Yegua Creek. It's the kind of bridge every local knows, the one with the rusted beams and the sag in the middle that makes your stomach dip if you take it too fast. She looked out of place like she'd been dropped there. White dress, long hair, barefoot. I slowed down, thinking maybe she was hurt or drunk. Folks in these parts stop when someone looks stranded. It's just the way it is. I pulled up alongside her and rolled the window down a crack. "You all right, ma'am?" I asked. She didn't answer, just tilted her head toward me, real slow, like a dog hearing something in the distance. That's when I saw her eyes catch the headlights. Gray, flat, almost glassy. I figured she was in shock, so I told her I could give her a ride, maybe take her up the road to Caldwell where there's a sheriff's substation. I unlocked the passenger door, but before I even reached across the seat, I heard the soft thump of the back door shutting. I froze. She was already sitting in the back seat. I swear I never saw her walk around the car. 1 second she was outside in the dark, the next she was behind me, her pale hands folded neatly in her lap like she'd been there all along. The dome light didn't even flicker. I told myself maybe I just hadn't noticed her moving. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the headlights played tricks. I started driving, trying to shake off the unease. The bridge rattled beneath us, the steel beams groaning as the car rolled over. The first few miles she didn't say a word. I tried small talk. Asked where she was headed, if she lived around here, if she wanted me to call somebody. Nothing. Just silence, except the faint sound of wet fabric shifting whenever the car turned. It smelled faintly like pond water, like something left out, in the rain too long. About 10 minutes in, I caught her reflection in the rear view. She was smiling. Not wide, not friendly. Just a thin stretch of lips that didn't match her eyes. "You can let me off at the next bridge," she finally said. Her voice soft and scratchy, like someone who hadn't spoken in days. I knew there wasn't another bridge for 20 miles, and that stretch of 21 is nothing but pine and fence line. I glanced in the mirror again. Her smile was gone, but her eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. I tried to play it cool. "Ma'am, there ain't another bridge till Bastrop. You sure you don't want me to drop you somewhere else?" No answer, just the sound of her breathing, slow, even, too steady. By now, every hair on my neck was standing up. I kept my eyes on the road, but the urge to look back got stronger. When I finally gave in, the back seat was empty. I slammed the brakes, the car fishtailing slightly on the shoulder gravel. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I spun around in my seat, shining my phone flashlight into the back. Nothing. Just the crumpled fast food bag I'd tossed earlier. But the smell, that wet, earthy smell, was stronger than before, like the whole interior of the car had soaked it up. I sat there with the hazards clicking, cicadas buzzing in the trees, and not another set of headlights in sight. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I noticed something in the rear view. A pale figure standing in the middle of the bridge I just crossed. Same white dress, same hair hanging over her face. I hit the gas and didn't slow down again until I reached the all-night Chevron in Bastrop. I parked under the bright fluorescent lights and sat there, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all. When I finally got the courage to look in the back seat again, I saw it, a single wet footprint pressed into the middle of the seat cushion. Bare, narrow, pointed straight ahead. I never drove Highway 21 at night again. I drive nights because the desert listens better after dark. Daytime in West Texas is all mirage shimmer and heat off the hood, but at night Route 67 opens up like a long black river, and you can hear everything. The wind sliding around the cab, coyotes tuning up out past the fence line, the long moan of a freight miles away, even your own thoughts when the CB goes quiet. I run parts from San Angelo down through Mertzen, Big Lake, Rankin, Fort Stockton, then cut toward Alpine and Marfa before dropping into Presidio. Oilfield hardware, ranch feed, palletized mystery, whatever fits on a flatbed and won't spoil. In the heat. I know the mile markers by heart. I know where the shale changes color and where the highway dips just enough to lose the radio for a minute. I know the smell of creosote after a rare shower and the way mesquite thorns whisper when you brush past them. It was a Friday, and I could tell from the glow. San Angelo had been lit up with those Friday night football lights, the kind that make a whole town hum. Out by Mertzen, I passed a school bus still idling, a couple of parents in lawn chairs in the back of a pickup, empty concession wrappers fluttering in the breeze like little white flags. I topped off in Big Lake, burnt coffee at the Stripes, cashier with maroon nail polish and a radio playing George Strait too loud for that hour. I bought 2 Allsups burritos that I told myself I wouldn't eat until Fort Stockton and ate them before I hit Rankin. That's a Texas thing too. Good intentions don't make it past the county line. My CB was on Channel 19 out of habit more than anything. I go by Catfish on the air because I liked the way it sounded when my old man used to say it. 10-4 Catfish, he'd tell me when I was little, and he'd let me hold the mic in the driveway, back when he'd pretend the radio reached farther than the barn. I don't use my real name on the air. Nobody does, not if they've been around long enough. I'd been listening to the usual chatter all evening, eastbound complaining about a smoky bear near the wind farm, 2 good old boys arguing about which Allsups makes the best chimichanga, somebody singing half a chorus of Amarillo by morning, then signing off. Then, somewhere south of Rankin, the channel went quiet. Not unusual. You get pockets, out there where the land swallows you. But it stayed quiet too long, the way a room does when somebody you don't see is holding their breath with you. I hit the rumble strip by accident, right wheels chattering along the edge of the world. I eased back, checked mirrors out of reflex, and that's when the radio woke up like a startled dog. Jesse, it said. Nothing else. Just my name, plain as an introduction. A man's voice, not quite old, not quite young, no drawl or the wrong kind. My name, which I hadn't said since I turned the key. My name, which I never say on the radio. I thumbed the mic without thinking, which is how you get yourself in trouble. Come again? The desert sucked my word away. The speaker hissed. I told myself I'd misheard it, some other name. Jensen. Jasper. Skip from somewhere else bouncing off the ionosphere. It happens out here. Albuquerque gets into your bones sometimes. Oklahoma City slides in under the door. Far voices arrive easy in the dark. I turned the volume down a notch and told myself to stop thinking about it. Past Rankin, the land lies flatter than you think it can, and the windmills blink red in a soft rhythm that puts you into a heavy-eyed trance. I cracked the window from habit, and the night came in smelling like dust and pastures that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Somewhere right of the highway, a pair of coyotes answered each other in those high yips that sound like laughter if you're tired enough. I rolled my shoulders, counted to 50 at the strips of reflective paint in the opposite lane, and let my mind run ahead to Fort Stockton, smoky coffee, stretch my legs, check the straps on the flatbed, maybe buy a calache if they had any left, Jesse, the radio said again. You're late. The way the voice said late stopped me with both hands on the wheel. Not accusing, not friendly. Just knowing. Like somebody who'd seen my logbook. The hair on my arms prickled. I glanced at the radio just to make sure the thing hadn't switched channels by itself. The orange number still glowed 19. The squelch was where I always kept it, the gain one notch below my usual, because I'd been getting too much static near the pumps in Big Lake. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep it light. You got the wrong handle. Silence. Mile marker 256 winked by. A jackrabbit stuttered across the road and got out of my headlights just in time. I took a breath that felt too big for my chest and let it out slow. I told myself a story to explain it. Somebody I knew was behind me, messing around. One of the Presidio boys, maybe. They could have seen me fueling. They could have ID'd my rig. Maybe they'd heard my voice before and guessed my real name. People do that. You think you're a mystery, and then someone at the Stripes says your name like they've known you forever, and it turns out they saw your debit card last week, or your company logo shows up on a list, or your cousin told his cousin who you are. West Texas is big and small at the same time. The radio crackled, the way it does when somebody keys up and holds it too close to their mouth. Under the squelch, I heard wind, or maybe a fan, or maybe my own blood. Then, turnout. At 261, coffee's cold. There's a small dirt turnout around mile marker 261 that I use when I need to check a strap or stretch, without the lights of the station buzzing in my teeth. It's nothing. Caliche scraped flat, a cattle guard, a survey stake leaning up out of the earth like a crooked tooth. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I hadn't planned to stop there tonight. Still, there it was, the reflector post and the little gap in the fence, waiting like a seat where somebody already warmed the cushion. I had no idea why I turned in. Maybe because if the voice was a prank, it would end when I called their bluff. Maybe because if it wasn't a prank, I wanted it over someplace where I could put both boots on the ground. Gravel crackled under my tires. I let the engine idle down to a diesel heartbeat and shut the lights off to take some of the heat out of the air. The night came back in a rush. The hum of power lines, the desert insects that never really quit even when it's cool. A train. There it was. Way off past nowhere. A long, low horn drifting like fog. The CB hissed like a snake with nothing to say. I could see my straps in the starlight, a regular row of buckles and fibers and tension that had kept the load honest all the way from San Angelo. Coffee's fine, I said aloud, because sometimes you have to give the thing you're scared of a shape. Yes, sir, somebody said on the radio, and this time it wasn't just a man's voice. It was my father's laugh under it. Not loud, not exact, but if you ever love somebody long enough, you know the way their laugh lives behind certain words. My dad's handle was Redbird. He'd been dead 7 years. I stepped down from the cab like the ground might throw me back up. I circled the rig because that's what good drivers do when they don't know what else to do. Straps, tight. Tires, good. Load, still 2 pallets of seal kits, tarped clean, chains snug. I listened as hard as I could. A grasshopper hit my shin and I almost jumped out of my skin. The night kept its secrets. That's when I heard footsteps that weren't mine. They were not behind me or beside me. They were above me, soft and measured, crossing from the back of the cab to the front as if someone had climbed up on the catwalk and was walking the roof. I froze with my left hand still on a strap. The steps reached the front of the cab, then stopped. The desert said nothing. Wind moved a little and didn't. Walked as normal as I could to the passenger door and yanked it open because I couldn't stand not knowing. The cab was empty. The radio speaker wasn't even humming now, it was off or dead or dreaming. I leaned in and checked the power. The little red LED was dark. I hadn't turned it off. I never turn it off while I'm rolling. If you've ever spent years listening to a thing, you can tell when it's watching you back. That radio was as innocent as a rock. I reached toward the power knob and the speaker jumped to life without my hand on it. All hiss and the soft susurrus of other lives like a seashell put to your ear. The voice that said my name wasn't my father's now. It was a kid's. A boy or girl in that breathless age where the vowels get stretched because you're learning how to speak around your front teeth. "Jesse," it said, "don't stop on the bridge." "Which bridge?" I asked before my brain could process that I was asking a child in my truck radio for travel advice. "Say again?" "Don't stop on the bridge," the kid whispered, and I swear I heard other kids behind it like the echo from a school gym. There are a dozen little bridges between Fort Stockton and Presidio. Most of them don't carry water. They jump dry arroyos choked with brush and old tires. Out by Shafter, there's a low bridge that goes over a wash that surprises tourists. When it rains and looks like a friendly gully when it hasn't. The last time it ran was spring. I had no plans to stop on it. I closed the passenger door gently and walked around the hood, scanning the highway for any headlights. Nothing. I was alone. Except I wasn't. I could have called it in. A weird transmission on 19, maybe some kids, on a base station messing with drivers. In the old days, men would have triangulated that signal with a grin and a pack of Marlboros and paid somebody a midnight visit with beer. But you can't triangulate a voice that knows where you bought your last coffee in the exact place you pull off to pee. You can't knock on the door of a transmitter that's inside your own life. I climbed back into the driver's seat and put the radio on scan just to remind it who belonged to who. The scanner walked through empty channels like a man checking. Rooms he'd already locked. Static. Static. A burst of Spanish that faded quick. A preacher's voice out of nowhere. Or maybe a talk show out of Odessa bleeding in odd. Then on 19 again, a conversation that reached up from the undercarriage of time itself. "You see him?" a man asked. "Clear as day," another said. "Blue Kenworth company logo on the door, westbound by the windmills." "Copy that," said the first. "Catfish, you got your ears on?" I can't explain the shiver that went from my throat down into my palms. It's not fear exactly, when something knows your name. It's the sense that you've been walking around with a light on in a window and didn't know it until somebody waved through the glass. I pressed the mic and the cord felt like a living thing in my hand. "Break 19 for the westbound. By the windmills," I said, because doing the wrong thing politely is still polite. "Go ahead." A long second passed, and in that second I heard other sounds behind the voices. Tinny crowd noise like a high school stadium, the pop of a cooler, lid, a dog barking that I could swear I knew, the way he yipped when he didn't mean it, the way our old healer used to. Then the man said, "Don't stop on the bridge," in my father's voice, and my hands did that thing where you think they'll just let go if you don't look at them. I drove. Fort Stockton was a brief island of fluorescence and burned coffee, and a kid mopping a floor who moved the wet sign with his hip without looking. I paid for gas inside because my card reader at the pump blinked dumb at me, like it had forgotten what it was for. I tried to talk to the cashier because human voices are better than the other kind, but all we said was, "How's your night?" and about the same, and that wasn't enough to anchor me. I tightened the straps on the flatbed even though they didn't need it, checked the load list like it might have changed while I was looking away. 2 pallet seal kits for a mine maintenance outfit in Presidio, 1 long crate of something with a part number and no description. The desert smelled like old tires and the faint perfume of the woman who had used the pump before me. I got back in the truck and told myself I wasn't going to touch the radio again. I touched it anyway and switched it off. The LED went dark like a closed eye. Beyond Fort Stockton, the sky goes deeper and the stars thicken until you remember why people come out here to pray. The highway felt empty enough to hear my own heartbeat. A jackknifed plastic bag surfed the wind in my headlights and the hair stood up on my neck because for a half second it looked like somebody stumbling. I crossed into Brewster County with a coyote trotting my pace along the fence to the right, like we were 2 friends who didn't talk much. Alpine sleeps early but not in October when the college is humming and there's a game. Even that late. The field lights had just clicked off, leaving the stadium hulking like a ship. I rolled past the Whataburger where the drive-thru still had 3 trucks in line, and a girl in an orange visor laughed at something I'll never know. Past Alpine, the dark turned big again. The kind of big that makes you think about how small your lungs are. The first time I saw the lights, I figured they were ranch work. People run UTVs along the fence line after midnight all the time, checking gates, counting cattle as best you can count that kind of life. 2 lights steadier than stars moving parallel to me off to the right, where there isn't a road. They weren't high like the Marfa lights get when the air plays tricks. They were low and even and going my speed. I watched them in the corner of my right side mirror until my eyes watered. Then I looked straight at the lane because they only got closer when I paid attention. The CB was off. The cab was only engine, and my breath and the faint rattle of a key on a ring. I told myself to let it go. Let the lights do what lights do. It was late. West Texas runs on weird and glare. I was 3 songs deep into a playlist I didn't remember starting when something tapped the glass behind my head, not the windshield. The little sliding window at the back of the cab. A soft, polite tap like a coin flicked by a careful hand. I didn't turn around. There are rules inside a long night that you don't understand until you break one. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 like a driver's ed poster, and I said carefully, "I hear you." The radio, which I had turned off, said, "We know," in a chorus of voices. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was like a family gathered close, around a birthday cake before the song, that hush of faces leaning in. The LED on the radio was still dark. The cord lay slack. The tiny screws in the speaker grill looked like 2 little eyes if you wanted to see it that way. I swallowed and something in my throat clicked like a tiny latch. Between Marfa and Shafter, the highway forgets you for long stretches. The fences drift away and the land lays open in brown-gray waves. The ghost town sits to the west of the road like a memory you can see. A white church, a scatter of houses that still hold up the sky. A cemetery with ironwork that looks fresh if you don't look close. I don't stop there. I don't take tourists there. Not that I take tourists anywhere. It's a place to pass and nod at. But tonight, as I came down that gentle grade toward the wash where the low bridge hides from the taller light, I saw hazard flashers blinking red in the road. Ahead, a car sat sideways right before the bridge, door cracked, no headlights. The hazard pattern was wrong. It was perfectly offbeat with my flashers when I tapped mine to check. It looked learned somehow, like it knew the right way to be wrong. Slowed, because you slow when you see trouble on a dark road. You don't blow past what might be somebody having the worst night of their life. I put my hand out toward the radio without meaning to, and before my fingers touched the knob, the speaker said crisp and private like a voice cupped to your ear, "Don't stop on the bridge." The car ahead was a mid-2000s sedan, the kind a grandmother keeps clean and a grandson borrows. There was no one in the driver's seat that I could see. The door was open the way you leave a door when you're about to jump back in any second. I eased left, straddling the center line, nose in the wind, scanning for movement. This is the part that's hard to tell without sounding crazy. The air right above the bridge shimmered like heat even though the temperature had dropped down into the 50s. Not dramatic, not a movie effect. Just a shimmer like the one you get above a hood in August, except there was no reason for heat, and the rest of the night was as clear and sharp as a cut. I didn't stop. I didn't even brake hard. I took the far left sliver of asphalt, trailer, wheels kissing the rumble strip on the other side. And as I passed the open door of the sedan, I saw fingers curl around the edge of it from the inside and pull it wider. Not grabbing for me, not pleading, just pulling it wider like somebody about to step out who wanted more room. I was past before my brain caught up. My hands were sweating on the wheel like I'd been holding a fish. I looked in the mirror, because that's what you do. You look at the thing that scared you even if there's nothing to be done. In the red blink of my own hazards, which I had never turned on, I saw the sedan still sideways, still door open, still bridge shimmering, and something standing on the line where the bridge began. It wasn't tall, it wasn't short. It was exactly my height. It held nothing. It turned its head toward me like a man noticing a neighbor, and it didn't have a face. I know how that sounds. I don't mean it had no features, I mean my brain, which is good at making sense of bad things, refused to fix anything there. Where face should be, my vision just slid off, like looking at gasoline on water, color without shape, motion without meaning. I looked away because there are more rules in a long night than there are stars, and one of them is, don't stare at the thing your mind can't hold. The radio spoke again. A plain man this time, the kind you'd meet in line at the feed store. You're all right, he said, just roll. I'm rolling, I said out loud, to the radio or to myself, I don't know. My mouth tasted like pennies. I kept the speed a few miles under sane. A minute later, I realized I'd been holding the mic in my left hand like a talisman without knowing when I picked it up. The LED was still off. I put the mic back in its cradle and told it to stay like a dog. Presidio is a different kind of quiet than the open highway. It's a border quiet, expectant and heavy, and even the dogs bark with an eye on the river. I eased into the yard with my paperwork already in my lap so I wouldn't have to stand there flipping pages while my hands remembered how to be hands. A foreman in a reflective vest signed without looking up and whistled at a guy in a forklift who moved like he'd been moving in his sleep. The smell of the river drifted in. Wet earth. Something green trying its best in a place too hard for it. A train honked somewhere that wasn't nowhere anymore. Life clicked back to its profile. You hear that rollover north of Shafter? The foreman asked idly, like you ask a guy if he saw the score. He had a way of asking about bad things, like they were weather. What rollover? I said too fast, and that's when I realized my mouth was still ahead of me. Trooper said some drunk left his car blocking the lane like a fool, the foreman said, pen scratching. Called in a hazard. No car there when they drove through. Just lights in the wash. Boy said radio was goofy as a carnival ride for 20 minutes, you know how it is. I nodded like I knew how it was. I'm from here. I know what it means not to say you're scared. He went back to his clipboard. I took my signed copy and walked toward my cab like a man going to a door he already knows is locked. Inside, it smelled like coffee and dust, and the little pine tree that has lost its pine months ago. The radio LED glowed gently, steady and red, like nothing had ever happened. I turned it off. It turned off. I turned it on. It turned on. I changed channels. I scanned. A man in Spanish asked if anyone had seen a lost dog near Ojinaga. I told him no without touching the mic and then laughed at myself. One short bark that hurt my throat. There was something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there when I left San Angelo. A paper square, creased along the corners like it, had been folded under somebody's wallet for a long time. I picked it up. It was a laminated card, old, the kind of laminate that yellows and bubbles if it gets too much sun. On one side was a cartoon bird with a CB mic in its beak and the words, West Texas Skip Shooters. On the other, written in a hand I knew, was Redbird and a frequency, and below it a second name, Catfish, in my father's block letters, the way he used to label my school lunch when my mom worked late. I sat with that card in my hand until the forklift beeped me back to the world. I asked the foreman if his guys had been in my cab while they were unloading. Sometimes they borrow the air conditioning to warm up. Sometimes they move a thing so they don't back into it. He blinked at me like I'd asked him if he made biscuits. No, sir, he said. We don't climb into a man's truck. Driving back north toward Marfa, the night felt thinner. I kept the CB off and told myself I would keep it off until San Angelo. I made it past Shafter and the wash and the low bridge without seeing anything except the road I'd already seen. The sky started to lighten in the east. Not yet dawn, but that paler black that means the worst is either behind you or ahead. Near the rest area before Marfa, 3 rabbits sat in a line in the warning lights as if they'd agreed on it. I laughed again because what else can you do when rabbits make a plan? Marfa had a few tourists parked at the viewing area for the lights, bundled in hoodies they bought in town. A kid pointed out at nothing with the seriousness only a 10-year-old can muster. I drove by without stopping because I don't have arguments with sky tricks. I pulled into the Stripes on the edge of town and bought a coffee I wouldn't drink and a breakfast taco I wouldn't taste. The cashier had painted a tiny jack-o'-lantern on her thumbnail and asked if I wanted a receipt. I said yes, which I never do because sometimes you want proof you existed somewhere at a particular time. When I got back to San Angelo late that morning, My dispatcher said I looked like 20 miles of busted fence and told me to go home. I lay on my couch in the little rent house off Bryant and listened to the neighborhood dogs tell each other about squirrels and thought about what I'd say if somebody asked me what happened. I thought about my father's old card in my glove box and how the laminate had split along the corners where his fingers used to worry it when he was thinking. I thought about my name said in a radio that wasn't on. For a few nights I didn't take the route. Another driver covered Presidio, said the radio was quiet as a church he didn't believe in. I did in-town runs and told myself I liked the work just fine. The card sat where I'd left it. I didn't touch it because if I touched it I'd have to decide if it had always been there. And deciding is a kind of surrender. But you can't dodge a road forever. West Texas will just outweigh you. The next Friday I was back on 67, past Mertzon's, stadium lights on a crisp night that smelled like dust and Dr. Pepper. I kept the CB on this time because pretending a thing isn't there never made it go away. The chatter was normal, which is to say stupid and tender and human. A lady driver, with a handle I liked, Sagebrush, warned me about a deer family that had decided the shoulder was a living room. A kid in a pickup asked if anybody had seen his lost dog. A rancher near Rankin said goodnight to a voice he called Honey and forgot to let go of the mic, so we all heard the quiet between them as real as any words. Somewhere south of Rankin, just where the land goes flatter and the windmills wink that slow blink, the radio said my name again. Jesse. Not my father, not a child, not a voice I could pin to a face, just the sound of my name being held up to the light and looked at. I didn't answer. Not because I was brave or scared, because I didn't know the rule for that moment yet. I drove on. I passed the little turnout at 261 and didn't stop. The night moved back around me, patient as a hand. Off to the right, low and steady, two lights moved with me along the invisible line of fence. They stayed there, polite as neighbors, until I couldn't decide if they were real or something my truck had learned to show me to keep me from feeling alone. A month later, I asked my mom if she remembered Dad's old CB club card. She said he kept one in his wallet and one taped under the ashtray in his truck. Why? She asked, and I told her I'd found one in mine. And she said she didn't put it there and she didn't know how it would have gotten there, and then she told me a story I'd never heard. How the night before Dad died, he sat on the back steps and listened to the cicadas and said, half to himself, I hope wherever I go, they still run Channel 19. I don't have an ending for you that ties anything up. If you need a thing to touch, I can tell you this. Sometimes at night when I pass Shafter and the wash is only dry dust, the radio clicks like it's catching something low, and I hear a crowd cheer the way a town cheers on a Friday when the boys run out under the lights. Sometimes the cheer lifts into my name. Sometimes I hear the creak even when it's not running. Sometimes I roll over that bridge at legal speed, eyes straight ahead, and the air doesn't shimmer at all. And sometimes, only sometimes, the little red LED on the radio goes dark for a blink, like an eye, and I don't feel alone out there. And that's either a comfort or a warning, and I couldn't tell you which would be better if I tried. I filled up at a lonely pump south of Lubbock, and the next morning the sheriff told me the place had burned down in '89. That's the short version that makes folks laugh at first, and then look at me a second longer than they planned to. The longer version is what I'm writing here, not because I expect anyone to believe me, but because I haven't slept right since, and maybe lining it up from start to finish will stop the sound I keep hearing. Metal on metal, like a walk-in. Doctor being shouldered from the inside. It was a Friday night in late September, cool enough that the wind had teeth but not cold enough to chase the cicadas off the poles. I'd driven up from Snyder to watch my cousin's boy play wide receiver for the Mustangs. If you've never been under the lights for a Texas high school game, you won't understand the miniature towns they build for a couple hours every week. Diesel trucks angled like sentries along the fence, the smell of Frito pie and mustard, drifting up in little humid clouds, band uniforms squeaking, and between plays that big West Texas quiet, like the whole plane is holding its breath. He had a good game, caught a slant, took it 30 yards. We high-fived under the bleachers, said the usual, proud of you, son, y'all drive safe. And by 11:20 I was on US 84 pointing southeast, The cotton fields black and endless, the occasional wind turbine blinking red like a slow heartbeat. Lubbock's Loop 289 lights fell behind me until it was just darkness, an FM road sign now and then, the silhouette of a pivot irrigator stuck in the air like a frozen spider. I don't drink anymore, not since my 20s, and I'd had 2 Dr. Peppers and a bottled water at the game. It catches up with you when the wind is constant and the heater's on your feet. By the time I passed Slatton, I felt like a pressure gauge creeping into the red. There was work on 84, cones and a patrol car with lights doing a lazy spin, and a guy in a reflective vest waving folks off toward FM 41. I rolled down the window to ask how long the detour would be, and he said, 30 minutes if people mind. They're manners. Hang a right at the end and follow the caliche. You'll pop back on around Southland. Careful, no shoulders out there. Then, like he thought it might help, he added, there's a station near Slide, old one. Some folks leave the lights on for the cotton guys this time of year. FM 41 in the dark is not a road so much as a suggestion. It's 2 lanes of chip seal floating over what feels like a tabletop. The Llano Estacado laid out flat as a promise. The wind hits you from every angle, and the lines of cotton furrows run until your eyes can't hold them, and then you blink and feel the truck drifting. Coyotes popped off in the distance, a set of yips and a long laugh like they were telling jokes across the whole county. I turned down the radio to listen to the tires sing, and somewhere out there I heard a train horn, 2 longs and a short ghosting over from the BNSF line near Slayton. The heater clicked. I passed a sign for Ropesville I couldn't quite read, and another for Slide. The gas light hadn't come on, but my bladder was a tighter schedule than the gauge. That's when I saw the canopy. Low and square with that old faded white paint, the kind of fluorescent tubes that hum like insects, a blue Pepsi machine leaning a little by the door. The numbers on the roadside price board were crooked metal tabs, not LEDs. 1.03 for regular. I remember thinking there's no way that's right. Under the canopy were 2 pumps, mechanical with the little rolling numbers and a flip switch that goes ka-chunk. A bug zapper snapped over the door, and the sound felt fat and wet in the cool air. There wasn't another car around, and the fields pressed up close like the building had been cut out of them. I pulled in and aimed the truck where the concrete was less cracked. The pump handle felt warmer than the air, like someone had set it down a minute before. The sticker on the side said Fin A in diagonal letters where the eye had peeled off, and a sun-faded safety poster reminded you to kill your engine and not to smoke. I flipped the switch and the pump woke with a slow animal sigh, the numbers clicking to 0. When the fuel started, it sounded different, thicker somehow, and the hose shook once like a shiver. Inside the store, a bell rang, the way bells did when you open doors before everything was a motion sensor. I saw movement behind the glass. A man in a blue work shirt with a stitched white oval over the pocket. "Marvin," the oval said. He lifted a hand in a lazy wave like you do to a neighbor at a stop sign. "I've been in enough old stations to know how they smell. Rubber and dust and sweet freezer air seeping from a cooler that's never quite sealed right. This one smelled like that, with something else underneath it I didn't put together at the time. The faint iron smell you get when you stand too close to a metal pole that's been ground against concrete." The bell rang again when I tugged the door open, and the fluorescent lights hummed like a hive. The place was clean but out of time. A rack of cassette tapes with paper price stickers. A spinner full of road maps, the kind you have to fold back right or you'll tear the seams. A cardboard Dr. Pepper clock over the counter with 10:24 on it. The clock hand said 1:44. I looked at my phone, it said 12:37. "No service." "Evening," he said, blowing on a cup of coffee like he'd just poured it. He was maybe 50, shorter than me, hair combed back with something that gave it a little shine. "Y'all heading out past Post?" "Toward Snyder," I said, "if I can find the highway again." "You'll make it," he said, like we were talking about a test. His voice had the kind of dryness old panhandle men get, as if every word has to climb through dust to get out. "You running unleaded?" "I am." I nodded back at the truck. "Pump 2. He tapped the register. It wasn't a screen. It was a big cream-colored thing with brown keys, the totals hidden behind a little glass window. Next to it sat a metal credit card imprinter with 2 black rollers, and beside that an ashtray. The ashtray was empty. He set a receipt book on the counter. "You been through here before?" I told him no, just a detour off 84. He nodded at that like a man who knows the back roads of 15 counties and doesn't believe in accidents. "Folks'll do anything to get home after a game." He glanced up, listening. For a second, I thought he meant to something I could hear too. The wind, the bug zapper, the hum of the cooler. But then I realized he was looking at the Dr. Pepper clock. The hands hadn't moved. 1:44 and staying there. "You got a restroom?" I asked. "Round back," he said. "Keys on the 64 keychain." He slid a plank of wood with a Chevy emblem across the counter. The key was old brass on a heavy keychain cut out in the shape of a 1964 Impala. The wood was blackened on one end. I didn't register that then. I said thanks and stepped out into the wind again. The restroom was a single door on the back of the building, lit by one weak bulb that let moths bang around like they were knocking to be let in. The lock turned rough, and when I flicked the light, a pull string came down and nothing changed. I used my phone flashlight. There were no spiders. Maybe they'd blown to Amarillo a long time ago, and the only graffiti was a carved T+J near the handle. I washed my hands at a sink that was a little too cold and a little too clean, like someone scrubbed it with steel wool an hour earlier. And when I opened the door again, the wind was stronger, pressing my shirt against my ribs. In the mirror on the way out, I saw the yellow of the canopy on my cheek as if the light was a stain. I wiped it without thinking and realized my fingertips smelled faintly like smoke. It should have bothered me, but there are 100 ways a place like that can smell like that. Somebody burned coffee, somebody killed a mosquito with a book of matches, somebody left a brake pad on a counter, and a man alone on an FM road. At 1 a.m., we'll pick the explanation that lets him keep moving. I handed the key back. "Appreciate it." "Sure thing," he said. He set it back in its place on the shelf. When he did, his sleeve rode up and I saw a watch on his wrist. The face was melted, like those old novelty clocks with dripping numbers, except this wasn't art. The crystal was warped, the hands glued in a sag at 1:44. He noticed me noticing and covered it with his cuff. "You want a coffee for the road?" He asked faster than felt natural. I said I was good and grabbed a cold Big Red out of the cooler instead. When the cooler door closed, a pressure wave of cold air rolled over my wrist, and I felt goosebumps climb up to my elbow. The inside of the glass fogged in a pattern that wasn't random. It looked like the palm of a hand pressed and dragged as if someone was trying to write with it. I stared. The fog thinned, and it was just glass again with finger streaks where I'd touched. I took it to the counter and he wrote the total in blue ink on the receipt. "Gas plus soda, $12.91. He slid the imprinter toward me. "Card?" he said. "We're running a little behind on the machine." I set my card in the metal tray and he pulled the rollers with a practiced motion. The carbon copy peeled up like a bandage. He handed me the top and tucked the bottom into the book. He had nice handwriting for a man who'd spent his life on his feet. At the bottom, below the total, he wrote, "Thank you," then his name, then the time. 1:44. "You drove through?" "Slayton?" he asked again, too casual. "Uh-huh. Wind'll take a barn door off the hinges tonight," he said. "You be careful. Folks forget that at night out here the straight road's the most dangerous thing. Puts you to sleep." When I stepped back under the canopy, the night wrapped around me like water in a stock tank. Not cold exactly, dense. The pump clicked off hard enough to shake the handle, and the little flip switch fell back to its resting spot with a sound that was precisely like the sound a deadbolt makes when a door is locked. The bug zapper snapped again. The nearest field rustled as if something ran through cotton at knee height and kept going. No service, no other cars, nothing alive but the moths, the coyotes, and me. I drove away thinking about the clock and the smell and the price and the way the receipt ink had bled just a hair at the bottom. And then I passed a fence line where someone had painted "Jesus Saves" on a piece of tin in red letters, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A mile later, my phone buzzed back to life and showed one bar. I turned on the radio and found a local station carrying a call-in agricultural show. The host was talking about cotton yields and whether the early cold snap would hurt the gins. The caller had that same Lubbock dryness, talking like he'd measured the wind with his bones. They went to break, and an ad played for a store I hadn't heard since I was a kid, Gibson's Discount Center, followed by a weather report that said it was 53 degrees at 1:44 a.m. I looked at the dash, 12:58. Somewhere behind me, on the edge of hearing, a train wailed. 2 longs and a short. I got home sometime after 2. I slid the receipt into the little pocket in my visor where I keep parking stubs and punch cards for burritos and forgot about it. The next morning I stopped at a cafe attached to a feed store and posed for eggs and a coffee. It's the kind of place where all the tables are square and the chairs all squeak the same way. And the pictures on the wall are of ranch families, lined up under windmills with the words, Lubbock Avalanche Journal printed in the corner like somebody took a photo of the newspaper and framed it. A sheriff's deputy came in for a to-go cup. He wore his hat low and his belt heavy with the tools of his trade, and he said, like all men in uniform out there say to everybody, "Mornin'." I said, "Mornin'." And then, because I was feeling friendly and because the coffee was good and because I wanted to see if he'd nod at whatever I said, "Y'all still let folks run that old station south of Slide, Fina or whatever? Fella named Marvin." He stopped, polite but blank. "Where at?" "FM 41. Price sign with the little metal numbers. Pepsi machine by the door." I could see it perfect in my head. "Open late last night." He set his cup down on the counter and did that squint you get when you're trying to look at something far away inside your skull. "South of Slide you got cotton and you got dust. Used to be a..." He snapped his fingers. "Used to be a Fina on 41 and 1730 back when I was a kid. Burned down in 89. Fella trapped in the cooler. My uncle was on the volunteer fire. Said, it was a miracle the fields didn't catch and take half of Lubbock County with them." The fork in my hand felt heavier. "No, this was last night," I said, careful to keep my voice level. "Lights on. Guy working." The deputy watched my face for a beat and then let out a breath through his nose. Not a laugh. Not quite. "I know folks drink after the game," he said kindly. "Listen, ain't nothing out there but a slab and some sunflowers. They never rebuilt. Said it was bad luck, or maybe just didn't pencil out." He tipped his hat. "You be safe." When I got back to the truck, my heart was kicking around in my chest like a rabbit caught in a wire crate. I pulled down the visor and took out the receipt. I expected the ink to have run, or the paper to be blank, some neat way to make me feel foolish and then relieved. It was there. Fina, block letters stamped at the top. The carbon copy had captured my name with that little raised impression like Braille and the numbers of my card. Only the first 4 and the last 4 because that's how it used to show. Gasoline, 11.4 gallons. Big red, 0.99. Total, 12.91. Time, 1:44 a.m. Under it, in blue ink as neat as a schoolteacher, "Thank you, Marvin." The paper smelled faintly like someone had held it over a match for a second and then blown it out. I should have driven home and decided that some old boy had cobbled a store together in a hurry for harvest and decorated it with his daddy's stuff, and that the deputy was mistaken or I had the roads wrong. Instead, I drove back because that's what you do when something itches your brain. You go back and make the world ordinary again. The FM road in daylight had a different personality, as if I'd been introduced to it at a party after seeing it across the room the night before and not knowing its name. The fields were color, bales wrapped in plastic like giant marshmallows, a tractor chewing a line at the horizon, dust devils trotting slow across the flat like shy people who don't want to be seen. I passed Slide, which isn't a town so much as a word, and the county road that cuts toward Ropesville, and then the place where the canopy should have been appeared as a square absence in my vision. There was a slab. The slab had a fringe of grass around it and a rectangle darker than the rest like a shadow had been burned there and never left. Broken glass had weathered into round beads in the dirt. A buried pipe stubbed up near where the pumps would have stood and was capped and painted red. Someone had hung a strip of caution tape off the pipe at some point and the sun had eaten it to lace. That Pepsi machine I'd leaned on was not there. No bolts where it would have sat, no scars. It was as if the field had inhaled and erased the shape of it. I stood on the concrete and the wind tried to move me like I was a new fence post and it was sizing me up. On one edge of the slab, near where the door would have been, the concrete was bubbled like a pancake. When my boot scuffed it, a dark flake came off, and underneath it was fine powder that smelled like a handful of pennies. Off in the distance, a train blew its horn twice, then once, and a moment later again. The sound had that lost in the open quality that makes it hard to place. I thought about walking the field to see if anything else had survived. One of those old letters from the price sign, a bolt from a canopy brace. But I've picked at enough old places to know the sense you get when you're not invited to. Look through the ashes. I left. The story could end there and I could chalk it up to a trick of the brain and a vivid dream with too many specifics. But 2 nights later, coming back from dropping a load of reclaimed lumber in Gale, I missed my turn off 84 on purpose and slid down toward FM 41 again. Sometimes we stand on the edge of things and lean. The wind lay low like a tired dog and the moon was too bright for the hour, washing the fields in a dull gray and making the power lines look like pencil marks. I kept the radio off and the windows cracked an inch. When I passed the place, there was nothing but the dark rectangle of the slab and the stubble of weeds. I pulled over 50 yards down and turned around and sat in the road with my blinker clicking like a metronome. No canopy, no hum. My eyes watered from staring. I told myself I was going home. On the 3rd pass, the lights were on. I didn't see them turn on. They were off and then they were on, angry and yellow like they'd been yanked from a place with too much electricity and stuck into the field. The canopy poured light onto the cracked concrete. The bug zapper snapped. The Pepsi machine hummed like a refrigerator in a fishing cabin. I pulled in and killed the engine and sat with my hands on the wheel like a student driver waiting for the instructor to breathe. The door was closed. Through the glass, I could see the counter and the Dr. Pepper clock. 1:44. I checked my phone. 1:07. No service. I checked the dash. 1:07. I took a picture. The flash bounced and made the light flat. In the photo on my phone, the building wasn't there. It was just tall grass pressed flat in the pattern of a rectangle and the stars looked like dust. The bell rang when I opened the door, and the smell hit me harder this time, like memory smelled before my brain put words to it. Marvin wasn't at the counter. I heard the cooler fan and the sound of a coffee pot clicking under itself. I said, "Evening," and my voice sounded too big in the room, like when you talk inside a church. Something thumped in the back. "Be right there," he said, but his voice didn't come from the back. It came from close, too close, and the hair on my arms lifted. A shape moved behind the display of peanuts and Slim Jims, the exact amount of motion a person makes when they pivot on a heel to face someone without stepping toward them. "I had to come back," I said, because honesty sometimes helps. "They told me this place burned down." He stepped into the light. The blue work shirt was the same. The patch that said Marvin was the same. His face wasn't. Not different like a monster or a mask. Different like a picture that's been under glass in a hothouse too long. The edges were blurred just a shade, and the skin had that look people get when they've been sick for a while and then decide to act normal. He smoothed that cuff down over the watch again without looking at it. "Folks say a lot of things," he said. "Say the wind's worse than it is. Say it's better too. Say the train stopped running when the Harvey house shut. You want gas?" I said yes because it was the least complicated of the things I could say. He tapped the register, slid the key plank across the counter without me asking, and then he looked past me to the glass front doors. The light outside went a little darker, not like a cloud but like somebody was standing under the canopy between the fluorescent tubes. When I turned to look, there was nobody there. The Pepsi machine rattled and quieted the way compressors do when they settle into a cycle. The clock said 1:44. The cooler fan whined and something inside hit the metal, slow and heavy, as if it were loose on a hook. "Do you ever close?" I asked. He smiled. A tiny thing he tried on like a hat that didn't quite fit. "Not when folks need it." Behind him, stuck with tape to the pegboard by the cigarettes, was a Polaroid. It showed the station in daylight sometime in the late 80s. You can tell by the cars. A square-bodied Chevy, a brown Olds with a Landau top, a Toyota pickup with a dent in the tailgate that made it look like it was frowning. In front of the door was a man in a blue work shirt with a white oval name patch. He was holding a giant pair of scissors like they used to make ribbon cuttings look official, and a woman and a little boy stood by him, smiling stiff and proud. Someone had written "Open 7 days" in Sharpie across the bottom, and the sun had bleached it until it was a whisper of gray. I thought he'd say those were his. That was his boy. That was the day he took over from somebody. But he just watched my eyes and didn't turn his head. Something scraped the inside of the cooler, not like a can slipping, louder. Metal on metal and then a hollow thump. The sound tapped an old part of my brain I didn't know I had. Our bodies know what it sounds like when a thing heavier than it should be hits a door. I said, plain as if it were any other question, "Is someone back there?" "People stop when they need to," he said. Not an answer. Maybe all the answer there was. Then I smelled it. Not the iron smell or the coffee. Smoke. Not sharp, brand new smoke like paper or grass. The old kind. The kind that lives in clothes and drapes and padding for decades after you think it's washed out. Sweet at the edges and mean in the middle. A small pop echoed from the back, followed by a soft whoosh, like when you open a wood stove, and the flame rushes to meet you. The fluorescent light nearest the cooler flickered once and steadied. Something hit the door again hard, and the sound traveled down the metal frame into the floor and up my legs. "I think," I said, and I didn't know what I thought. I walked toward the back like I had authority over any of it. When my palm landed on the cooler handle, cold shot up my arm so hard my teeth ached. The glass fogged from my breath and then cleared and left prints on the inside that hadn't been there a moment before. A palm. Big. Another below it, smaller. They drifted like things underwater and then reappeared. In the reflection, I saw Marvin behind me. He didn't move closer. He didn't move at all. "Don't," he said. And it was the first time he sounded scared. "What is this?" I asked. And God help me, I meant the whole room, the road, the county, the way time felt like a cage. "What is this?" Like if I picked the right words, it would cough out the truth. He didn't answer. He looked at the Dr. Pepper clock and then at the door and then at me. The bug zapper snapped twice fast as a heartbeat. Outside, something small ran through the cotton and changed directions and ran again as if it were confused. The cooler door shivered and the seal squealed and I could hear breathing. Not mine, not his. The kind you get between sobs when someone has used all the air they can find. I took my hand off the handle because I'm not a hero and I don't pretend to be one. Instead, I dug my phone out of my pocket and called 911 because that's what a decent person does when smoke and fear live in the same room. The call failed. I moved toward the front door for a bar and the bell rang as if someone had opened it before me. Wind came through the seam, carrying grit that hit my teeth. I tried again, and the screen lit with 911 calling, and then the strangest thing happened. It connected, but I wasn't on with Lubbock County. There was no recorded voice, no operator. There was a click, then the emptiest dial tone I've ever heard, like a person trying to imitate one. I said, "Hello?" and "Emergency at a gas station on FM 41. And the voice that finally spoke wasn't a voice at all. It was the sound of a train's horn filtered through a metal pipe. 2 long, 1 short, 1 long. Then it went dead. The Dr. Pepper clock clicked, not the hands, but the mechanism inside like a grasshopper caught in a jar. And the cooler made a long, low moan that I felt in my kneecaps. When it stopped, the silence that collapsed onto the room was like a ceiling, falling onto my shoulders. "Sometimes folks need it," Marvin said again very softly, and there was something like apology in it. He set his palm flat on the counter like he needed to remind himself the wood was there. The cuff of his shirt rode up, and I saw his watch face clearly for the first time. It wasn't melted after all. It was warped from heat, not enough to collapse it, but enough to bend it just out of true. And the metal band had a place on the underside that looked like it had fused and then been wrenched apart by hands desperate to get a thing off before it burned flesh. The hands on the watch weren't stuck at 1:44. They were stuck just before it, struggling to lift. I left. I won't pretend I made a brave choice. I took the receipt book with my name on it because it was under my hand and because a small feral part of me thought if I removed proof then none of it could be pinned to me. The bell rang and the wind practically pulled me through the door. and when I turned at my truck, the canopy went dark, as if a switch on a wall somewhere had been flicked by a careful finger. The night fell into place, every sound too crisp. Coyotes, the wind under the edge of a sheet of tin out back, the lids of the dumpster tapping. I drove fast, the kind of fast that makes you a worse driver because you're trying to leave a sound behind. When I hit US 84 again, the work crew was gone. The detour signs were stacked like cards on the shoulder. The stars looked lower than they had any right to. 2 weeks later, I ran into the sheriff himself at a diner in Tahoka, because the world is small when you spend it between farm-to-market roads. I showed him the receipt. He brought it close to, his face like his eyes worked better at that distance and made a non-committal sound. Then he asked me if I wanted to see something ugly. He took me in his Tahoe 10 miles down to the slab in daylight and pointed to the place where the concrete had bubbled and said his dad had told him the fire started in the cooler compressor. Lost power, kicked, sparked, and on a dry year like 89, there was enough dust alone to make the air burn. He said the man, he didn't say his name and I didn't ask, had run for the door, and the handle had heated, and the way the wind was that night made the flames move in a way that was described to me with a hand motion I won't repeat. Men ran from all over, he said. Volunteers. They got there in time to keep it from wrecking the field. But not in time to. He didn't finish. We think about that with these storefronts, he said, and touched the pillar of his truck like there was a computer inside that could calculate luck. How easy it is to get trapped by the thing you use to live. Then he gave me the receipt back like it was a county fair ribbon and said, "If you printed this at home, you picked a real good yellow. At night, every now and again, the sound comes back as I'm falling asleep. Not every night, not when I'm expecting it. It sneaks up out of my own house sounds, ice maker, fridge, heater, and I'll be right at the edge when I hear it roll, in from the distance like the wind is dragging it. Metal on metal, a hollow animal trying not to sound afraid and failing. I've tried driving out there at different hours. I've brought people, men who'd scoff at their own shadow in a hallway, and nothing is there. Or the slab is there and the light is perfect, and the only strange thing is the way the wind has a habit of laying your shirt flat against your ribs like a palm. One time I went alone just after 1. I sat in the truck and didn't blink, and when the light didn't come on, I felt disappointment sharp as a tack between my shoulder blades. I don't know who that disappointment was for. The receipt in my visor has started to brown at the edges like a biscuit left in too long. Some mornings I find it in the cup holder, though I know I put it back. Once, and I swear I'm not trying to make a story out of a nothing, the blue ink under thank you smeared. I touched it, and my fingertip came away gray like I'd rubbed a pencil. I held it up to the windshield, and a faint cross-hatching of carbon stayed clinging to the light like a shadow of my name. I wiped it away and it came right back the next day until I put the paper in the glove compartment with the manual and the tire gauge and left it there. I told myself I was protecting it from the sun. I was also trying to keep it from me. By now I've told the short version to a handful of people and the long version to exactly one, you. The deputy said it burned in 89. The plain facts say men drove out and fought a fire until their lungs hurt, and a man in a blue shirt with a white oval over the pocket didn't go home. It would be cleaner to talk about haunting, as if there's a program running at 1:44 most nights when the wind holds steady and the trains are on schedule. But there are no clean edges here. Some nights the field is just a field. Some nights, the station is there and nothing happens except I buy a soda and the cool air curls around my wrist like a cat. Some nights I won't drive that way at all because I dream about a cooler door and wake up to the smell of old smoke in my pillowcase and a train horn bubbling up through the mattress springs. I don't go out there with cameras anymore. I don't try to capture it. Look, this is how I've been thinking about it lately, even if it's corny. Out on those FM roads, people build little outposts against the wind. They make a place where you can get a soda and a bathroom and another 90 miles. They leave. Lights on for cotton crews and truckers and high school kids turning circles in dust. Sometimes a thing holds into the night because people need it. The wind and the trains and the fields don't care about our time. They care about pressure and weight and motion. If a place learned to be open at 1:44 a.m., because that's when Someone pounded on the inside of the cooler door and someone else hit it from the outside with both fists, and the lights hummed and the bug zapper snapped, and a man in a blue shirt tried to be in 3 places at once and then wasn't anymore. Well, maybe it keeps being open in the way it can. Maybe that's what mercy looks like when the only tools a place has are light and the sound of a bell. You don't have to believe me. In fact, it's better if you don't. But if you happen to be south of Lubbock after a game on a Friday night, and a detour sign bumps you onto a road that feels like it was poured for you alone, and you see a canopy where there shouldn't be one, and the price looks wrong, and the clock above the counter says 144, and never gets to 145, be polite to the man behind the glass. Pay in whatever way he asks. Don't touch the cooler unless you intend to open it. If you hear a train, count the blasts, and when you step back under the canopy and the pump clicks off with the sound of a lock, breathe in and memorize the air. It'll smell like rubber and dust and coffee and the faintest drift of old smoke. You'll carry it with you whether you want to or not. And sometimes when the wind rubs your house the way it does out here and your pipes knock, you'll remember that a thing can be gone for 36 years and still meet you under the lights when you need it, and that needing it isn't the same as deserving it, and that some doors won't open no matter how much you pound on the metal. I was coming home from a Friday night scrimmage in Lovelady, one of those preseason things where the band is still working out the fight song, and the announcer's mic keeps squealing. I'd helped my buddy Tanner haul the water coolers back to the field house, then stuck around too long listening to dads in folding chairs relitigate every play like it was the state championship. It was late August, hot in the way East Texas does hot, that stick-to-your-shirt humidity that makes the air feel like it has teeth. The cicadas were so loud you could feel the sound in your molars. When I finally pulled off onto State Highway 19 toward Crockett, the stadium lights behind me were still bleeding into the low clouds. I wasn't even supposed to be on that county road. I missed my turn near the Valero and figured I'd cut across on FM 229 by Houston County Lake, then take a smaller road I half remembered from fishing trips with my uncle. It was the kind of road that never gets a name. Just CR something on the sign if the sign hasn't been shot up. It turned to caliche and then to dirt. Pines shouldered in tight on both sides, the smell of warm sap and dust drifting in through the cracked window. Every few hundred yards there'd be a mailbox with a last name in vinyl letters, or a cattle guard that rattled under my tires. There was no moon to speak of. The stars were good, but not the peaceful kind, more like a scattered crowd watching, something they shouldn't. I had the radio tuned to 100.3 out of Lufkin, the DJ talking about how the Lions might be making a run this year if they could keep their quarterback upright, then cutting to Willie, then cutting to ads for a farm and ranch supply place that sold deer corn by the pallet. I wasn't nervous exactly. I grew up here. I liked the dark. It was the kind of night that makes sense if you're from around here. You keep it between the ditches and you'll get home. He stepped from the ditch into my high beams like he'd been waiting for the cue. A boy, maybe 10, maybe younger, maybe older. It's hard to tell at that age. He was barefoot and dusty and had on blue shorts with a white stripe up the side, and a t-shirt that might once have been red, but looked sun-faded and brownish under my lights. He had a backpack on one shoulder, limp and loosely zipped, and something stiff poking up inside it. Could have been a binder or a coloring book. He didn't throw himself into the road, didn't panic. He did that little sideways hand wave people do out here, like you're too polite to flag down a stranger. So you just angle your palm like you're shaking off water. I hit the brakes, not hard, not enough to skid, then eased to the shoulder where the dirt road bulged a little. Gravel crunch, dust moving like ghosts in my headlights. I was already rolling the window down. "Hey, bud," I said and heard my voice come out too bright. "You okay? You lost?" He didn't come any closer. He lowered his hand and tilted his head, curious. His face was the kind of face people call pretty when they talk about kids. Smooth, pale, a little too round to be called skinny. His hair was the same color as the pine bark behind him. The thing that got me, though, was the calm. Country kids are shy green nervous, or they're feral and bold. He was neither. He just watched me, that exact polite expression they teach for school pictures, front teeth a little too big for his mouth. Do you live out here? I tried again. You want me to call your folks? The radio popped. Not static exactly, like when you press your thumb on a speaker. The DJ's voice flattened and then came back a fraction of a second behind itself. It was just enough to make my shoulders tense. I glanced at the screen. 12:11 a.m. Cell service, 1 bar. I looked back. There was empty road. My high beams fuzzed out the pines, made the ditch grass glow white. I scanned left and right. He hadn't run. There hadn't been the scrabble of kid feet on gravel. He was just gone. And then I realized he wasn't gone. He was standing in the middle of the road behind me now, 50 feet back in the blue bright of my taillights, perfectly centered like a road crew had painted him there. This time he was smiling. Not wide, not creepy, just a smile like you give your neighbor at the mailbox. I ain't proud. I drove. Not fast. I didn't gun it past him or anything. I just eased off the shoulder and let the truck roll, found second, found third. The radio hissed and then the music came back, a song I knew every word to, and I sang along because for a few seconds that made everything square again. Kids play tricks. Maybe he'd had a friend in the ditch, maybe he'd jogged around the tailgate and I hadn't caught it. Maybe he was never that close and my brain was doing that late-night misfire it does sometimes. You spend enough time in the sticks, you learn where not to park your imagination. Crockett was quiet when I came in from the far side, most of the houses dark, but a few porches still lit, dogs giving lazy single barks from behind chain link. I stopped at the Brookshire Brothers that stays open late and grabbed milk and a bag of ice and a styrofoam cup of coffee that tasted like the pot had been burned in 2002 and never rinsed since. The cashier, older lady, bleach blonde hair, reading. Glasses buttered me with a, "How you this evening?" that made me realize my shirt was sweat stuck to my back. I felt silly bringing it up, but I did anyway. "You got any kiddos come through here tonight?" I asked, signing the little electronic pad that's always a beat behind your pen. "What kind of kiddos?" she asked, not looking up. "Just a boy. Young. Barefoot. Backpack." She clicked her gum and thought about it like it was a Bible verse she wanted to get right. "We had 2 Little League fellas about 9 o'clock with their mama buying Gatorade and Doritos. Had some FFA girls with the big bows earlier. Barefoot?" She wrinkled her nose. "No, I would have said something." "Why?" I told her it was nothing. I told myself the same thing and it worked until I turned off my porch. Light that night and the coyotes started up in the creek bottom. They sounded closer than they usually do. And then they went quiet all at once, like somebody in the dark had put a finger to their lips. I didn't tell anyone the next day. I'd been up late and up early. Saturdays when I helped my uncle check. Fence line out by Latexo. And by mid-afternoon I had that grit-in-the-eyes tiredness that makes you misplace tools and call people by the wrong name. We were stretched over a cedar post with a come-along, sweating through our hats, when Tanner pulled up in his Tacoma with a bag of taquitos from the Stripes. We ate in the shade of the stock trailer, dust sticking to forearms, and I almost forgot the whole thing until Tanner said, "You look like hammered hell, boy." "Didn't sleep," I said. "You go to Rusk last night?" He meant the scrimmage. "We got a defense?" "Better than last year," I said. I took the long way. "Home. You'll get yourself lost out taking the scenic route in the dark," he said. He crumpled his napkin and flicked it into the paper sack. "Buddy of mine swears he saw the loblolly hag off 287. I told him it was a woman out for a walk and he's like, 'Not at 2 in the morning, it ain't.'" He laughed. "Folks see things when they're tired." I was about to say I'd seen a boy, not a thing, and then I didn't. The way his smile had looked in my taillights came back to me like heat. I kept my mouth shut. We strung another 100 yards and called it, and I drove home slow and stupid because the heat will do that, make you lazy in the brain. It was only that night, the second night, that I heard the footsteps. There's a particular sound a kid makes on dirt. It's a pat-pat with a little high grit to it, not like a grown man's step that thuds and gives. I was in my living room with the box fan in the window and the game on low on my laptop, watching some out-of-town highlights because we never get ours uploaded on time. I had the porch light off and the interior lights dimmed because the heat carries into the electricity bill and my old window unit needs all the help it can get. The pat-pat came from the side yard. Not sneaky, not skulking. Just the sound of somebody walking, slow and even, and then stopping like they'd come to the end of a sidewalk. I stood up so fast the fan rattled. I didn't own a gun, never needed one more than a snake stick, but I had one of those heavy mag lights that doubles as a club. I grabbed it off the coffee table and went to the window by the kitchen sink and lifted the corner of the blind with one finger. He was standing in the space between the pecan tree and my propane tank. He was closer than he'd been on the road. The same shorts, the same backpack, one strap hanging low. His face looked the same until it didn't, until something in my brain decided the distances were wrong. He was 10 yards away, but his eyes were the size of a portrait. He didn't look at the window. He looked at the porch light fixture like he was trying to puzzle something out. His bare feet were dark with dirt except the part you could see for sure, his heels. They were too clean, like the dirt stopped politely at the edge of his skin. The part of me that still had manners walked me to the front door and made me open it slow so I wouldn't spook him. The air came in hot and smelled like wet plywood. Crickets and frogs stitched the dark back together. "Hey, bud," I said, and my voice did that too bright thing again. "You lost? You need help?" He turned his head toward me and smiled, that steady little smile, and I thought, I know you from somewhere. Not a specific place, not a specific time. The way you know a song before you're sure you've heard it. "Where you live?" I asked. He said something. I wish I could tell you what. It wasn't that I couldn't hear him. I could hear the shape of it clear as you can hear the shape of a train horn through trees. The vowel, the drag of consonants. But as soon as the meaning tried to land, the night made a small sound like breath in a microphone and the meaning broke apart. My brain grabbed at it and grabbed nothing. "You want me to call somebody?" I tried again. "Your dad? Your mama?" He was still smiling. He did that sideways wave again, the polite one from the road, but this time I understood it. He was telling me to go on ahead, like a ranch hand turning you down a lane. He wanted me to lead. Where? I can't explain how I knew, but I did. He wanted me to get in my truck. You make choices you can't justify. I backed into my house, left the front door standing open like I was raised in a barn, and took my keys off the hook from the nail by the fridge. I locked eyes with my own dumb reflection in the back door glass. "You're fixin' to drive some stranger's kid somewhere?" I said out loud, the way people talk to their dogs. "You're fixin' to be the guy in the story." The boy didn't move as I came out. The porch light made a weak cone. The frogs gave it up and hushed. When I turned my headlights on, he stepped back to the edge like he belonged there, where the yard becomes county and the county becomes woods. I pulled out onto the county road, and he wasn't in the yard anymore. He was where I expected him, in the right-of-way just past my mailbox, giving me that little turn-your-hand wave. He rode the shoulder in my peripheral, never running, never lagging, just always exactly where a passenger would stand at the side of a truck if they didn't want to get in and you didn't want to ask again. If I sped up, he was 50 feet ahead. If I slowed, he was 20 feet back. The radio did its thumb on the speaker thing and then came back as if everything was perfectly normal. We passed my neighbor's place with the cattle guard and the metal donkey welded out of scrap parts, and the donkey looked like it was watching us go. I knew where we were going before I let myself know. We were going back to the dirt road. I took the left on FM 229 and then the right onto the caliche, my truck rumbling like it always does over the washboard strips the county grader never gets quite right. The boy never waved harder or pointed. He didn't need to. I knew which turn to take. The pines leaned in the way they had the night before, like they were trying to hear the song in my engine. We passed a reflector somebody had shot with a .22 and a little roadside cross made from a 2x4 with plastic flowers wired on. The dates were too far away in my headlights to read. I didn't stop. The road dipped and the dirt changed color, and I realized I was remembering this place from before, from years ago, when I was 12 and my uncle took me to a stock tank out here to catch sunfish. We'd parked by a gate that had a chain but no lock, the kind of arrangement where everyone knows not to go but everyone kind of does. He told me a story about a house fire and a man who got back in time to pull his little boy out, only the man never came out and the boy never cried. My uncle has that farmer way of telling stories that makes them sound like weather reports. No extra, no lesson, just what happened and when, and how the ground looked afterward. I hadn't thought about that drive in 10 years. I came to a T, where the county road ended at a narrower track that had grass growing in the middle. On the fence post to my left, a piece of crooked aluminum had 3 letters sprayed in black. More, maybe Morales, maybe Morgan. Maybe the paint ran and hid the rest. My headlights swept a patch of bare dirt and I saw something there that I will swear to until I die. A set of small footprints in the dust. Not like a child had walked there a long time ago. Like he'd walked there 5 minutes ago. Crisp, the edges still holding the cut of heel and toe. The top layer of dust was feathered by the night breeze. But those prints were clean. I stopped. I don't know why I thought that was safe. I don't know why my hand went to the key like it had always meant to turn the truck off here. The engine ticked down and the frog started singing like someone pulled the curtain on a choir. In the new quiet, I could hear the high-thread voice of the power lines over the road, the insects making that high electric violin in the weeds, and underneath all of that, close, the pat-pat of bare feet. "Hey," I said, not loud, not gentle. "Hey, bud." He was where he'd always been when I looked for him. Exactly where I didn't expect him. I turned in my seat to see behind me, and he was 13 inches outside my window, his face right there in the glass, his smile sitting on his mouth like it had been waiting. I didn't yelp. I didn't jerk away. I just froze and felt the part of my brain that is a dog put its ears flat. Up close, he had freckles across the bridge of his nose. He had a cowlick that made the front piece of his hair want to stand up. He had the kind of long eyelashes boys don't appreciate until a girl tells them they should. He lifted his hand, placed it on the window, and for a second I thought, well, that's that. He'll leave a print, and I'll know this is real. But there was nothing. His palm made a perfect shape and there was no fog, no squeak. It was like his hand and the glass were looking at each other from opposite sides of a photograph. I don't remember rolling the window down. I must have hit the switch without meaning. Too, because 1 second there was that little gap and the next there was air between us. The night came in thick, the smell of hot pine pitch and something else. Wet charcoal, I thought before I could stop myself. Not sharp like a grill. Dull and tired like a rain-soaked ash pile. "Where do you want me to take you?" I asked. My voice sounded small. "Tell me where, and I'll take you." He said the same thing he'd said on my porch. The exact same cadence. Like a song looped and starting over. I made my ears grab the sounds and hold on. I sat there with the engine off, my knee pressed against the steering wheel, and I tried to make the shapes of his words into the shapes of a place I knew. The first part could have been Daddy. It could have been down. It could have been Donnie if that was a name he knew. The last part could have been home. It could have been whole. It could have been old. "Down home?" I repeated. "Your daddy's down home?" He smiled wider like I'd got it exactly right, and that scared me worse than if he'd frowned. He took his hand off the window and tapped the paint on my door, 3 little taps, and stepped backward into the road. When I turned my key, the engine caught too loud and the radio blew static like somebody had ripped a bedsheet in half. Then the station snapped in and it wasn't the Lufkin DJ anymore. It wasn't anything I recognized. It was that too clean. Silence that means the station's still transmitting, but nobody in the booth is breathing. Over it, I heard a sound I didn't think I was hearing until it kept going. The crossing bells. There aren't any crossings out here. They were soft, like someone had leaned a phone against a windowsill 8 miles away, but the rhythm was right, the way the bells hurry you up and keep hurrying you even when you're across the tracks. The freight line through Crockett runs near the center of town. Past the feed stores and the warehouses where you wait and count cars and get to work late. Out here, the only rails were the old timber spurs that got pulled up before my dad was born. The bells kept time with my heart, and then, under them, long and low, the horn. I don't know why I followed him. I don't know why I put the truck in drive and rolled forward onto the grass track like I was pulling into my own pasture. I don't know why he knew where he was going. But I did, and he did, and there we were. The headlights jittering over Yaupon and Broom Sedge, the truck apologizing out loud for taking this rough a path. The pine boughs brushed my windshield. The horn came again, far and near, and a shape, like a house resolved out of the trees. It wasn't a house anymore. Maybe it hadn't been one for 15 years. It was a rectangle with a roofline that sagged, hunched into itself like an old man. The windows were empty, the frames burned too. Ragged, the interior black in the way things are black not from paint but from hours and hours of heat. The front steps were 3 cinder blocks and a board. Someone had nailed a fresh no trespassing sign to the corner post. Someone else had stuck a plastic sheriff's badge into the crack of the porch rail. It had the faded sparkle of something, left for a long time and not touched again. The boy reached the bottom step and stopped. He didn't climb. He turned to me, as polite as you please, and waited for me to come up beside him like we were being introduced in a church foyer. "You live here?" I asked. I don't know why. I don't know what answer would have made the night any different. He tilted his head and looked past me toward the road. The crossing bells were still going. The horn blew again, and this time it had the rhythm of a number I knew without knowing how I knew. 2 long, 1 short, 1 long. I could see the boy, listening to it the way you listen for your name in a crowded room. He took 1 step up and then he stopped and his face went still like something inside him had heard what it had been waiting to hear. In the distance, faint as the way a memory wears through, a man called. It was the kind of call men make when they don't want to scare a child. Pitch high, question baked into the name like sugar into tea. I have never in my life heard a sound like that voice, and known so surely it wasn't meant for me. The boy's head snapped toward it and his smile went soft. He put his hand out like he was offering me a sticker and placed it on the rail where the plastic badge was. His palm didn't leave a print. But when he took it away, I saw a streak on the rail I hadn't seen a second before, like somebody had wiped dust off in a child's hand shape, and underneath the dust the wood was a shade paler, like it had been protected. "Hey," I said. Too loud, too much. And he looked at me, and for the first time I saw a question on his face. He was waiting for me to say something I didn't have. The horn blew again. The bells cut off like somebody yanked a cord. The night fell into itself. "Tell me your name," I said. He said it. I heard the beginning and the end and nothing in between. Ev, N, Al, N, Et, N. It was like a radio station you could pick up only at the crest of a hill, and we were standing in the little dip just below it. He lifted his fingers and made a shape in the air the way kids write on fogged glass, and I swear on my dead grandmother's ring he traced the letters backward, as if he expected me to be on the other side of something looking in. The pines creaked. The temperature came down sudden like a window unit kicking on. For 1 split second a light showed in the empty doorway. Yellow-white, not flicker, not flame, a plain fixture glow like you get from a cheap bulb over a kitchen table, and a man's shadow crossed it, stretched and ordinary. It was there, and then it was not, and the frogs took a breath and remembered how to sing. I didn't mean to reach. My hand went out like it had loaned itself to somebody else, and when my fingers got close to that not quite there hand shape above the rail, I thought, I am going to feel the smallest cool, the way you feel the air above water. I didn't feel anything. My hand hovered and the boy's smile went small in a way that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with pity. "I can take you to the sheriff," I said. "We can go now. I'll get you a Dr. Pepper. We can call whoever you need." He stopped smiling. He turned his head just enough that I could see the line of his jaw. He made the tiniest motion toward the trees, a tilt like a bird does when it measures a branch. He was listening again, and the worst part was that I knew exactly what he was listening for, and that there was no sound left in the night for him to catch. He had missed it. He had missed it by that much. I don't remember leaving. I remember the truck finding the road with the relief of a man making it into a bathroom after a long drive. I remember the pines opening their shoulders to let me through. I remember the radio waking up mid-song and the DJ's voice coming back, easy, talking about next week's forecast like it was an old friend and not a thing you have to survive. When I pulled into my driveway, my porch light came on by itself, the motion sensor catching bugs and dust and me. I slept with the box fan, on the floor by the bed, angled at the door like it could blow away whatever would come in. When I woke up, There was a line down the dust on my truck's hood, clean as a ruler where a small palm might have rested to look at the stars. Sunday after church, I drove back in daylight like a man goes back to a bar where he made a fool of himself, shame-hot and careful to be casual. I could pretend I was just going to fish. I stopped at the little cross by the road and got out with the engine running. The plastic flowers were sun-faded to confetti colors. A matchbox car sat in the grass by the post, blue paint mostly scuffed off, one wheel missing. There was no name on the cross, just a date, 2009. The month had been burned away by sun and a county truck passed and the man inside lifted 2 fingers off the wheel. I lifted mine back. I almost flagged him down, almost asked, but all the questions I had started with, I saw a boy in the dark, and I didn't want to say that out loud to a man with a county seal on his door. I drove on and didn't turn down the grass track. I told myself it would be trespassing, and what if the landowner came out with a shotgun, and what if I stepped through a floorboard and broke my leg and got eaten by yellow jackets? All that was true. The truth felt like a cover for something else. That night I did what people do when they're trying not to be the person they know they are. I turned on the TV and left it on something funny. I made a sandwich at 11 I wasn't hungry for. I checked the locks twice, then checked the one on the back door a 3rd time and laughed at myself too loud. When the coyotes started, they started far off like always, and then their voices slid up the creek bed toward my yard and stopped on the edge of it like a line drawn in chalk. It was 12:11 when something touched the side of my house. It wasn't a knock. It wasn't a scrape. It was the weight of a hand pressing gently on the siding, like you might do to test the strength of a stud behind drywall. The box fan rattled its grill in a nervous little song. I lay there sweating in the AC and thought, you could move to Nacogdoches. You could move to Dallas. You could sell this place to a cousin and say you needed a change. The touch came again, and this time I heard the pat-pat on the dirt. I got up. I left the lights off. I went to the window and lifted the blind with a finger. He was closer. He wasn't standing in the yard. He was on the porch step, his shoulder barely below the plane of the window. The porch light haloed the part in his hair. The backpack was still slung the same way, and a corner of paper stuck up from the zipper. He looked up past the light. Not at it, not at me. Past it, like he could see a fixture in a kitchen that wasn't there anymore. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He looked like kids look when they stand in front of a vending machine with $1 and a choice. "Hey," I said, soft as a lie. "Hey, bud." He turned his face toward my voice. He opened his mouth. The frogs outside my house all stopped and held their breath so they could hear him. He said the thing he'd said twice before, and a millimeter of meaning got through and skittered away. I had the worthless urge to apologize to him. I wanted to apologize for not knowing. I wanted to apologize for being alive in a house that had a light that still came on when I flicked a switch. "I can't hear you right," I said, stupid with wanting. "Say it again." He did. He took a step backward down the porch step, patient like he always was, and the outdoor bulb hummed the shape of a hymn. He made that polite wave in the air, the go on ahead, and this time I did something I hadn't done yet. I shook my head. "I can't go," I said. "I can't go again." I braced for the night to turn mean. I braced for a change in the heat, for the lights to flicker, for the coyotes to break into that laughing scream they do when they're brave and hungry. None of that happened. He stood there with his hand half raised, and something in his face got tired. He looked around my porch like he had the chore of noticing things and no time to finish it. He set his palm on the rail where my hand had set, down 1,000 takeout sacks and forearms and hot coffee cups. His hand didn't leave a print, but when he took it away, there was a cleaner oval in the dust, and I knew it for what it was. Not a mark he'd made. A mark he was reminding me of. My own. The coyotes started over by the creek. Not closer. Not braver. The night regained the eye-eyed shape of itself like a man's face coming back after a smile leaves. The boy stepped off the porch and the dark let him go. I stood there until my knees hurt, and I had to sit down on the edge of my bed and stare at my boots like I'd come home from a funeral. Monday morning, I drove to town early and sat in the Whataburger parking lot with a taquito and coffee that didn't taste like a 2002 pot. I googled the fire from my phone, hands shaking too much to hit the letters right. Crockett House Fire Boy Father 2009. The results were nothing useful. Old articles about winter heaters and space heaters and safety tips. A paywalled obit for a man with a last name that could have fit the MOR on that fence post if you squinted. I tried another search and another. The sun bled up in a sheet and my screen became a mirror. I could see the boy's smile on it, even though I knew that was my own mouth making a shape it didn't know it knew. I told myself 100 stories about what I'd seen. I told myself I was overtired. I told myself kids wander. I told myself about the way your eyes make a person out of shadows because that's safer than the other way. All of those stories were true. They just weren't enough. I started taking the long way home on purpose after that. The way through town with the lights and the train tracks, where you have to sit with your hands on your knees and count cars and watch the graffiti go by like a news crawl for people who live under bridges. Twice I got stopped at the crossing and I listened without meaning to for the horn behind the horn, like you can sometimes hear the harmony if you stand in the choir and bend your knees toward it. The second time, a little boy in the back of the car beside me put his palm to the glass and I put mine to my window, and we were two people touching nothing, vertical lines of clean in the dust. I have not been back to that house. I tell myself it's because of the no trespassing sign and because I'm not the kind of person who makes a thing that belongs to somebody else into something for myself. I tell myself there's nothing to see. Maybe that's true. Maybe there's just char and a porch and a plastic badge. Maybe there's a man across town who hears a horn at night and stands up fast in his kitchen and says a name that comes out both right and wrong, and he waits for a footstep that never comes. I don't have a moral for you. I don't have a lesson. I have a cross on a road with no name and a date with no month and a boy who knows the courtesy of a small wave. I have a window I clean more often than I used to, and a porch rail with an oval the exact size of my palm I can't seem to wipe away. I have a moment around midnight when the frogs breathe in together and hold it, like the world is about to say something and decides not to. Every now and then, when I'm tired or when the power blinks out for no reason, I drive out past Crockett on some back way I don't need to take. I tell myself I like the trees. I tell myself I like the long open where the pasture drops and the fence runs clean and straight. Some nights I see nothing but my own good sense in the mirror. Some nights the radio does that thumb on the speaker thing and then comes clear and the DJ says, "Time now, 12:11, like that's a coincidence instead of an appointment I keep. And once, just once, 2 weeks after I stopped going anywhere but the bright way home, I saw him on the shoulder of Highway 7 at the edge of the glow from the Shell station, hands at his sides, watching traffic like he was grading papers. The pump clicked off inside the building. The attendant stood up from behind the counter, stretching their back, not seeing anything at all through the flicker of the mosquito zapper blue. He didn't wave that time. He didn't smile. He looked at me, and something in his face said as clearly as if he'd written it backward on the glass, that it doesn't matter which road you take in the dark in Texas. Some nights there's a boy on it. He's polite. He waits. He knows the way. He's not lost the way we mean when we say it. He's lost in the way a bell keeps ringing after the train has gone by. One more time than you think. A little softer, a little farther off. And somehow, it still finds your ear. I was coming back from a Friday night game in Odessa, still hearing the band in my head and smelling the dust from the parking lot. Permian had outlasted Midland Legacy, and my cousin Eli had dragged me to Ratliff even though I had to be in Pecos by morning to help my uncle with a busted well pump. It was late, pushing close to midnight, and the West Texas wind was doing that steady low push across the flats, rocking my little Silverado just enough to make the into-the-night drive feel longer than it was. I topped off at the Loves out by Penwell, grabbed a Dr. Pepper and a honey butter chicken biscuit from the Whataburger next door, because the line wasn't too bad for once, and settled into the long black run on I-20 where the lights thin out, and the radio turns to static between stations. If you don't know that stretch, it's the Permian Basin in a nutshell. Pump jacks nodding in the dark like tired cows, flare stacks licking the sky orange out on lease roads, caliche dust coating everything, and the railroad keeping you company off to the south, a long gold. Serpent of Union Pacific cars that moan at the crossings. The posted speed says 80 and people treat it like a suggestion. The air smelled faintly like diesel and mesquite, and that always there mineral tang. The whole land like a broken machine. That's been running too long. That's where it started, the lights first, not the truck. I checked my rear view and saw twin white points way back. Too far for me to care. A minute later, they seemed closer. Then close. Then so close the glare lit up the back glass and washed out the dash. I moved to the right lane and the lights moved. With me, hugging my bumper in a way that made my palms slick. People tailgate on I-20 like it's a sport, and sometimes it's the oil field boys in big rigs who haven't slept, so I braced for the horn or the pass. But nothing. Just there. Sitting so close I couldn't even make out the grill shape. I tapped my brake to flash them, not enough to slow. No reaction. I slid into the rumble strip for a second to make a point. The lights lifted as if the truck's front end rose lightly, and then they drifted left and felt lined up like they were going to pass. I glanced to make sure I wasn't about to be sideswiped, and my heart went weird in my ribs. The passing lane was empty. No dark mass, no chrome. Just headlights moving alongside thin air, riding level with my driver's door. For a second, the lights hung there as if a truck was pacing me, and I turned my head to look straight into the cab. There was nothing. No silhouette, no dashboard glow, no outline of a person. The lights were mounted at the right height for a semi, a little higher than my window line, and I could see the hint of a hood curve when the glare cut across, but behind the glass there was no one. The wind pushed us both and the lights slid ahead until they were in front of me, and as they did, my radio, which had been catching some preacher out of Midland, went to fuzz, and then this broken CB-sounding hiss, a voice that wasn't words so much as breath. It rose, fell, and flattened all in a heartbeat, and then the lights pulled away and everything was normal again. I told myself it was the wind and the way the highway curves. I told myself the driver was low in his seat, a tiny guy hunched over, his wheel the glare hiding him. I told myself I might have zoned out from the long day and the biscuit and the sugar. A semi had passed me, that was all, and in another minute I'd see its rear clearance lights and the reflective tape and the big square shadow out ahead like a moving building, but there was nothing in front of me. The white stripes came at me and went under me, hypnotic, and way up the black you could see little red dots. A taillight from some other vehicle that had been there before. No recent pass. And behind me, when I looked again, the highway was empty all the way back to the last little rise. I drove with my jaw tight until the Penwell exit signs fell away behind me, and the endless flat took over. Somewhere out by no trees, the wind got steady like a hand on the truck bed, and a train horn blew 3 long notes and a short from a crossing I couldn't see. To keep myself anchored, I did what my dad taught me back when he let me take the old F-150 on county roads. Check mirrors, check speed, check gauges, check road. I even said it out loud like a fool in the cab. Mirrors, speed, gauges, road. The heater fan kept wheezing on that sweet spot between warm and too much. The Dr. Pepper got warm in the cup holder. The night stretched. Then the lights came back. It wasn't like they grew from a speck. It was like they blinked on 2 car lengths behind me. 1 second the road was empty. The next second I had a pair of off-color halogens filling my back window. The kind a lot of older rigs have where one looks a hair more blue, the other a hair more yellow. I felt that stupid, helpless flash of anger you get when someone won't drive right. And I swung onto the shoulder again to give the message. Gravel pinged my undercarriage. The lights rose again like the front end was light, like the tractor wasn't carrying a load at all, and they floated left. I told myself to look, to really look. So when the lights were pacing me again, I turned my head and leaned forward so the edge of my windshield pillar didn't block anything, and I saw the cab, dark glass, the ghost of a steering wheel, the faint reflection of my own face for a second. Seatbacks, 2 of them, driver and passenger. Dashboard, blank. No dome light, no driver, no shape. Something hung from the rear view. Truckers hang. All kinds of stuff, Jesus fish or little plastic rosaries or a set of dice like it's Vegas. But it wasn't quite swinging. It was moving in these tiny, tight circles like it was being stirred by a fan that wasn't there. The wind hit hard, and shoved us both a foot right, and I flinched and jerked the wheel, and when I looked again, the lights were gone. The lane was empty. My pulse thudded like I'd run a sprint in boots. The radio hissed once in my speaker like someone breathing right up against a mic. I could smell hot brake dust, but it might have been my imagination. I told myself I needed people and light. The next place with any was Monahan's. There's the Sandhills State Park off to the north where the dunes glow a little even in the dark, like snow if you've never seen it, and then the Stripes and the Allsups with their buzzing neon. I fixed my sight on exit 83 and the green sign that would bloom out of the dark, and for a few miles everything behaved. The train's horn was a metronome somewhere south, and the wind kept pressure on the driver's side and then eased. The lights appeared a third time, and I just said no out loud like that was going to matter. They didn't drop in behind me this time. They were already ahead, floating in the right lane. And then they veered across to the left like they were avoiding something in the road I didn't see. Their beams caught something black and low in the median and cast a long, twisted shadow, like a man on his knees. The AM radio went to a frying pan sound. My truck's engine hiccuped like a coil missed one beat. The highway bent, that long, shallow curve that sneaks you past the dunes, and for a second we were angled so I could see, straight into the mystery cab. It was like a stage set made of darkness. There was shape without detail. And then, maybe because the sandhills catch the wind different and it was tossing grit across the asphalt, my high beams flicked for half a second. One of those electrical hiccups that happens in older trucks when you hit a bump, and in that blink of bright shine the glass of that cab flashed and I saw clarity. There was no driver. The seatbelt on the driver's side was pulled across and clipped into the buckle. The steering wheel was turned a quarter left. The thing hanging from the mirror was a small faded plastic angel with one wing broken, and the string it hung on wasn't moving at all. And on the passenger seat, where somebody would toss their lunch pail or their atlas or their hoodie, was a cap with a company logo I didn't recognize, and a rectangle of paper, the corner of a clipboard maybe, sitting nice and square like it, had never been jostled. Then my lights dropped back to normal and the cab was black again, and the truck that wasn't a truck lifted and drifted ahead until the lights were a faint pale smear in the dark and then were gone. I blew past the Monahans, exit like I didn't even see it. I only realized it when the blue interstate sign with the food options slid by in a quick flick, and I swore, and my hands were shaking, and there wasn't another easy stop for a little bit. I did the math in my head and decided I'd ride it to the Ward County rest area on the westbound side. It's well lit and has those picnic pavilions that look like space-age hats. I'd pull in, park under a light where the cameras point, breathe, maybe call Eli and make him laugh me out of it. I took the rest area ramp hot and coasted into the lot. A couple of RVs sat there humming with little blue TVs glowing inside. A DPS cruiser idled nose to nose with a big black Tahoe, no trooper in sight. The flag on the pole cracked once in the wind and then sagged. I parked right under one of those tall sodium lights that makes everything amber and washed out, and grabbed my Dr. Pepper like it was a talisman. I waited. 5 minutes. The hiss of the wind. The sound of the highway like a river. My heart slowed down. Then I saw light move across the scrub out beyond the picnic tables. Not headlights, more like beams. Searching. The way a truck's high. Beams cut across when it takes the curved exit. I could track the path it would take if it came in. Down the entrance ramp, curve past the pet area, swing wide if it's long and may need room. I told myself I wanted it, that I wanted a real truck with a real tired driver to pull up so I could step out and say, "Man, you were scaring me. Watch your spacing," and both of us could roll our eyes and put it behind us. Nothing came in. Instead, the light skimmed the edge of the lot and I realized it was the highway again, just a vehicle passing. The way the landscape is out here, the angles get strange and you can see lights where there's no road. I was about to start the engine when the radio, dead silent since Monahan's, made a sound like someone dragging a fingernail across a microphone. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even that strange if you're used to AM. But in the empty cab under the buzzing lot lights, it was enough that I reached for the dial, and as my finger touched it, the sound turned into a voice. I know how that reads. Radios catch things. Skip happens. Truckers used to joke that if you throw a coat hanger into the air in the Permian Basin, it'll pick up 3 church stations and a Mexican polka you won't shake for a week. But this was different. It wasn't English and it wasn't Spanish. It wasn't a language at all. It was the acoustic shape of pacing, like somebody counting under their breath, not with numbers, but with breaths, in and out and in again. And every 6 or 7 breaths, there was a small wet click, like a tongue touching the back of teeth. I turned the radio off and the sound did not stop. For 1 second, one long second that slipped like a belt, my dash was dark and quiet and the truck was off and the breathing continued, perfectly even, somewhere to my right. I flicked the key and the engine caught and the normal noises came, back to hide anything else. I didn't sit there and argue with myself. I threw it in drive and eased back out onto the ramp and told myself I was being ridiculous and that I was putting miles behind me and that sunrise had to come at some point. I told myself a lot of things. If you've ever driven out there, you know the stretch between Monahans and Barstow gets empty. Pecos is 20 more miles after that, and from there Alpine and Marathon and all that Big Bend country feel like a different world. You start to see roadside crosses and you wonder about the stories. Out past Piote, I passed a little white one with faded ribbon and a plastic bouquet, and because I was stupid from nerves, I glanced at the dates. The year was 2 years back. The name was Ma Ruiz. That's all I remember. I felt something, crawling on my scalp, the way your skin tries to make sense of a draft. When I looked back to the road, the lights were ahead of me again, floating low like they'd come up out of the bar ditch. I told myself to do something different. Running hadn't changed anything. I signaled and moved into the left lane and eased up behind them like they were any other rig. I kept my speed a couple under, waiting for the pass to present itself, and I studied the back of that trailer. There was no trailer. The lights were attached to nothing, and I don't mean that in a poetic way. There were no brake lights, no dot, tape, no mud flaps with some trucking company's name in script. There was no square shape eating the lane ahead. There were only those 2 white eyes moving together in the night, with a suggestion of height and mass, as if there had to be a truck between them and me. But the dark was swallowing everything except the beams and the faint outline of a hood. A gust hit us and the beams bobbed the way any trucks would, a little late compared to the wind because of the suspension flex. And in that floating motion I felt a kind of vertigo. Whatever was there behaved exactly like a truck except that. It wasn't there. I sped up and the lights sped. I slowed and they slowed. I turned my high beams off and on like a signal. No reaction. Finally, I made a decision that felt like taking a leap off a porch at a guess. I signaled and eased closer, until I was where I would be if I were, pulling alongside the tractor's cab. The radio hissed, then clacked like someone tapping a mic. My window glass vibrated just a little as a blast of wind hit us both. In the moment the air moved, the lights flickered like bad fluorescent bulbs. For an instant I saw the chrome edge of a mirror and the smear of a door handle. I saw the ghost of a shadow where a driver's arm would be if someone sat there. Then the flicker settled and the ghost lines were gone, and I was rolling even. With nothing, I kept going. The left lane opened up ahead. I inched forward inch by inch, heart punching my throat. I passed where the cab should have ended, and just as I hit the place where I should have been looking at the front bumper and the grill, my truck lurched as if I'd driven into a crosswind gust at 60, even though the flag at the rest area back behind would have told you the wind had gone steady. My hood dipped and I had the irrational sense of a huge shape sliding across my path. The Dr. Pepper bottle fell over and rolled under the brake. I kicked at it, and it wedged itself halfway under the seat, and I heard that little plastic angel beating against glass. It wasn't in my cab. The sound of it was so clear, tap, 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 that my brain decided it was close as my own mirror. But when I looked, my mirror was empty and my side glass showed only my face, washed pale by the dash. The tapping kept up as I moved beyond the invisible truck. It followed me, like a frame rate glitch, never any closer, never any farther. I got past the lights. I edged back into the right lane like someone crossing a creek on stones. The tapping faded, and the not truck's lights fell behind me in a way that didn't make sense on flat highway. I told myself I had won something small. Barstow came up with its sad handful of houses and the black ribbon of Pecos River under the bridge like oil catching a sky without stars. The red blinking antenna outside of Pecos, the one you can see for miles, winked like an eye tired of watching. I thought about pulling into the Allsoups there, the one with the burritos that sit under the heat lamps and make the whole place smell like stale tortillas. But I wanted my uncle's place and a couch and the dogs barking and a door to lock. So I took the business route and felt the town fold around me in darkness and porch lights, and I didn't see the lights again for a few blessed minutes. My uncle's house sits out past the high school, down a caliche road that turns into two ruts when it rains. There's a cattle guard that will rattle your teeth if you hit it above 15. And beyond that, a pump jack you can see from the kitchen window nodding through most of the year. I turned off onto that road and my shoulders unknotted because nothing that belonged to the interstate liked caliche. I bounced along, dust filling my beams, my eyes going soft at the edges with the first hint of sleep. Half a mile down, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Eli, you make it to Pecos or did Permian ghosts get you? I smiled at the screen like an idiot, even though I didn't want to tell anybody anything yet. And in the little pocket of reflex where you multitask even though you shouldn't, I typed back, almost there. That was when my headlights hit the cattle guard, and the bars reflected back like a mouth of old teeth and something moved behind my truck. I didn't see it. I felt it. The way you feel a tractor trailer come up on your bumper when you're in a car that weighs half as much. A pressure, a presence, a change in air. I checked the mirror and all I could see was dust lifting and falling in a cloud. No rear lights to reflect, no shape. But the dust behaved like something big had slid into my tailgate. It boiled and then flattened in two parallel trails as if wheels were spinning and then grabbing. The cattle guard sang under my tires. My radio, off for half an hour, ticked like a clock in the dash. The yard light by my uncle's garage was on, a fat cone of white with moths beating themselves stupid against it. The dogs, which bark at leaves thinking about falling, were silent. I rolled up by the side porch and didn't turn the truck off. I listened. Nothing. No engine but mine, no air brakes hissing, no glass ticking down from hot to cool. Behind me, the dust was still settling in slow swirls, and in it, I swear to you, I could make out the faint ghost of a grill where dust refused to fall for an extra half second, and then it dropped like it had to, and the yard was empty. I cut the engine. For the first time all night, the wind died, dead calm like a held breath, and I heard the train far off, 3 long notes and a short, and then its wheels toe-nailing around a curve. I could also hear inside my cab with the key out and the dash dark, the steady metronome of my hazard light switch even though I hadn't turned them on. Click, click, click. When I went inside, I locked the door and checked it twice. My uncle's place smells like dust, old coffee and cedar from the closet where he keeps his boots. His dogs lifted their heads and thumped their tails once and didn't bother to get up. I stood at the window like some old man who watches weather, and at first there was nothing to watch except night. Then a pair of white lights eased along the caliche road and stopped at the cattle guard. They didn't crest it. They just sat there, high and pale and fixed on my house, and the dust in their beams showed how little breeze there was, little eddies and then stillness. I couldn't make out any shape around them. I went to the back of the house and looked out that window too, and on the far side of the yard, out by the pump jack, another set of pale light showed from an angle that didn't correspond to any road at all. I told myself they were neighbors. I told myself they were just the way light plays in the basin where flat and sky and distance make tricks. I walked through the house, turning on lights like a child chases shape out of the room. I poured water into a cup and didn't drink it. My phone buzzed again with Eli texting a clip from the game, some slick highlight, and a second time with a question mark when I didn't answer. I typed out, "Made it. You won't believe," and erased it and typed "all good" instead and set the phone face down like it could catch a glance of something it shouldn't. At some point, I lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling until its fake wood grain became a parade of faces. I don't know when I slept. I know when I woke up, because it was to the sound of my uncle clattering around the kitchen and the dogs finally doing their job because the world was normal again, and to a light slanting under the blinds that made everything look safe and blank. Over coffee, I told him the simple version. Somebody in a big rig had been a jerk and tailgated me and messed with me all the way to Pecos. He shook his head and said he didn't like the way folks drove on the interstate and, nephew, half those boys ain't slept a decent sleep in a week. We went out to the pump around 8, and the sun was high enough to bleach the sky white at the edges and the wind was back doing its push. By the cattle guard there was black rubber smeared on the bars where a heavy thing had rolled across. Wrong, but not the way my tires would have. The lines sat a little wider than my track. On the caliche, in the angle where you could still make out the tracks from last night, there were 2 parallel lines cut deeper than yours or mine would. They ran up to the guard, hesitated, and then vanished over it into the narrow strip of road, like the ground forgot they were there. I told myself it was nothing because the alternative was the kind of something you don't say out loud, not on a bright, hard morning where the wind carries words a little too far. We fixed the pump. It was a coupler. I skinned a knuckle and went to the sink and washed and watched the rust-colored water rinse pink off my hand, and felt stupid for being spooked. When I went back out to the truck, I saw the one thing I didn't expect. Hanging off my rear view mirror, the real one inside my cab, was something I had not put there. It was small, cheap. A plastic angel with one wing snapped clean off at the shoulder, swinging on a length of stained string that looked the color of old nicotine. It swung not with the breeze from the open door, but in little tight circles like it was worrying itself to a stop. I didn't touch it. I shut the door and it made that hollow thunk older trucks do, and the little angel kept circling once, twice, and fell still. I watched it for a long minute, the way you stare at something you think might move again, and it never did in any way that could be a trick of the air. I took the angel down later that afternoon and set it on the kitchen counter by the coffee maker. My uncle saw it and said, "Huh," and didn't ask. He's the kind of man who can tell when the shape of a story shouldn't be poked. That night I put a rag over the rear view because the mirror kept wanting to catch my eye. I drove back to Odessa 2 days later, in the light, with the radio on an FM country station that stayed clear most of the way, and I didn't see any stray lights or feel any pressure that wasn't the wind. I did notice, out by No Trees, a roadside cross I hadn't clocked before. It was new, the wood still clean and the paint not yet sun-bitten. The name on it wasn't Ruiz. It was just M, no last name, and under it, instead of dates, someone had hung a little plastic angel, both wings whole. I cannot tell you what I saw on I-20 that night in a way that will satisfy you. If you want the rational track, I can give it to you easy. I was tired. The wind made the semi's lights bob weird. The radio caught a scrap of CB. West Texas plays tricks on the eyes with its distance and darkness, and the way the land is stretched like old leather. If you want the other track, yours will be better than mine because you'll fill it with whatever thing sits in you and waits for nights like that. All I can tell you is that sometimes, when I'm westbound, and the sun goes down, and the train sounds off across the flats, I catch the shape of light behind me in the glass and my chest tightens like bracing before a hit you can't stop. I flip the radio to AM just to hear somebody's voice, anybody's, even a preacher rasping about the wages of this and the promise of that. And every once in a while, not often, not in a way I can plan for or prove, I hear a slow, even breathing in the speaker that isn't the engine, and a soft clack like a tongue on teeth, and I say out loud to an empty cab, "I see you," and watch my mirror until the highway gives me back only myself, small and pale in the glass, and the darkness, beyond where West Texas runs its course and doesn't care who you are. When the wind is right, when the dust moves in those steady sheets, I swear there's a moment where a pair of lights float at the exact height they should, and then veer off to avoid a thing no one can see. And the little broken angel in my junk drawer at home spins a tight circle for no breeze at all, and settles. And I don't open the drawer to check because I already know what I'd find and that the end of the story isn't there. It never is. Not out on that highway. It was a Friday night in late September, the kind that sneaks up with a little cool in the wind but still smells like hot asphalt and mesquite. I'd been down in Brady late finishing an HVAC call at a feed store. Compressor on a walk-in cooler had gone out and the owner didn't want to lose a weekend's worth of beef. I stretched the job so I could avoid the post-game traffic, which was stupid because there's always traffic after a high school game on a Friday around here. By the time I left, the scoreboard lights were already off and the cicadas were taking the field. The moon floated thin and low. I got onto US 87, headed northwest, my toolbox rattling in the backseat and a paper cup of Allsup's coffee going tepid in the holder. The radio barely pulled in anything but static and a preacher out of Coleman promising to save me if I mailed him a check. Past Eden, the highway flattens, and your world is just fence posts and telephone lines. Dust hangs in the high beams like cigarette smoke. I kept it right at the limit because DPS likes to sit dark just outside of town. About 10 minutes north of Eden, I saw her, standing just past a green mile marker, thumb out, a little backpack slung over one shoulder. Not a usual sight, not at that hour, not on that stretch. I slowed automatically because my uncle would have tanned me if I left someone stranded, and because it looked like a regular person, not trouble. She was maybe 19 or 20, slim, dark hair mostly, tucked up but wince-white across her cheekbones from the headlights. She wore a faded denim jacket with a patch on the sleeve, something with a bolt of lightning through it and scuffed white sneakers that had seen too much caliche dust. She held her other hand close to her chest like it hurt. "San Angelo?" I asked after I rolled the passenger window down. Wind pushed in the smell of creosote and the warm, almost sweet stink of roadkill somewhere I couldn't see. "Yes, please," she said, a little breathless. Just to town. By the loop is fine." Her voice made me think she'd run from somewhere or was trying not to cry. I popped the lock and she climbed in. Careful, like the seat might bite, then tugged the door until it closed solid. She smelled faintly of damp hair and the lemony cleaner high school gyms use on their floors. Her backpack went on her lap like a shield. "I'm Amy," she said after a mile, not quite looking at me. "If that matters." "It does. I'm Caleb." I told her I lived outside Cristobal, just south of San Angelo, and she made an "oh" like that explained everything. We drove for a while with the radio low, just the road hiss and the whoop-whoop of seams. She kept an eye on the passenger mirror. I figured she'd had a fight with a boyfriend or parents, or she'd missed a ride after the game, something normal. I asked if she wanted the air hotter and she nodded. "Sorry to impose," she said after a bit. Things got weird, and I wanted to get to town." "Friday night gets weird everywhere," I said. "You going to ASU?" It was a dumb question, but my mouth works when I'm nervous. She smiled a little. "No, not yet." When we hit the first city lights, the radio sharpened a hair and I got that feeling you get when you come off the dark highway into civilization. Gas prices glowing like constellations, a billboard for a car wash that never seems open. The wind had shifted and I could hear a train horn off to the west, long and lonely across the flats. We rolled past the welcome sign and I told her I'd drop her where she needed, any place that felt safe. She lifted her hand and pointed. "The first light is good," she said. "I'll get out there." It was a strange place to stop, the first light by the frontage road before Loop 306 curls around. But I told myself maybe she had someone waiting. The light turned red. Under the halogen glare, everything looked too sharp. Her jacket's seams, the dust on my dash, the scuffed toe of her right shoe bouncing a nervous rhythm. I glanced in the rear view out of habit, watched a pair of headlights crest the rise far back. When I looked right again, my passenger seat was empty. The door hadn't opened. The lock was still down. The weight of her was gone so suddenly the truck tilted back a hair, the springs uncomplaining. My brain tried to make it reasonable. She'd slid down on the floorboard as a joke. She'd crouched somehow. I reached over with 2 fingers and waved them through the air as if I could brush her. There was nothing. The smell of damp hair stayed for a few breaths, then lifted out my open vent like it had been vacuumed. The light turned green. A horn barked behind me and I took my foot off the brake and rolled forward because that's what you do when the world still wants you to. I pulled into the stripes by the loop and sat for a minute in front of a diesel pump. My hands were shaking in a stupid, embarrassing way. I checked the door again. The lock, the floor. I found, on the seat where she'd been, a black elastic hair tie with a tiny silver thread wound in. It looked cheap, stretched out, and a few dark hairs clung to it. My truck is old and loud and nobody breaks into it, but I put the hair tie in the little flip-out ashtray like it needed safekeeping. Inside Stripes, a couple of oil field guys in muddy coveralls were buying taquitos and laughing too hard. I asked the cashier, a kid I've seen a dozen times who always has a different baseball cap on, if they'd seen a girl get out of my truck. He gave me a look like I was messing with him. "Sir, I've been right here." He flicked his gaze out the plate glass. Nothing. The horn across the way moaned again, and the shelves buzzed the way fluorescent lights do when they're a day from dying. I drove to my place in Cristobal with the cab light off and the radio off and the window a hair down, even though it was cold enough now to see your breath. Coyotes yipped in that gossipy way they have, passing news from one pasture to the next. I watched the passenger seat from the corner of my eye like it would refill. It didn't. My gate squealed like always. My dog Bandit didn't bother to stand when I got home, just raised his head and thumped his tail twice against the porch boards because it was late, and he's old, and things have to be very strange to move him. I told myself it was a trick of the light and adrenaline. I told myself she'd slipped out without me seeing because I was thinking about the train, and the light had gone green and I'm not as sharp as I was at 20. I told myself lots of things. None of them helped me sleep. Saturday morning, I drove into town for a thermostat install off College Hills. Kids in blue jerseys were still cutting across yards, kicking at dry drifts of live oak leaves from the night before. I thought for an hour I could shake it. I finished the job, hauled my ladder down, and when I turned around she was standing by the curb, hands in her jacket pockets, hair up, the same as the night before, except the daylight made her look less pale and more like a normal West Texas girl who spends too much time inside. I set the ladder on the grass because if I didn't, I was going to drop it on my feet. "You need another ride?" I said very carefully, like loud might break this world. My client's dog barked inside the house, muffled. "Just to town," she said, that same breathless tone. "By the loop is fine." "Where are you coming from?" I asked. It was the wrong question. Her face went still, the way animals go still when a hawk's shadow passes. She looked at the curb, then at the stop sign like those were safer topics. "I won't bother you long," she said. "Please." I had every reason to say no, but decency is a kind of muscle memory, and if I said no, she'd still be wherever she was, a thing living between my eyes and the curb. I told her to hop in and we drove the same couple miles. She sat the same way, quiet, watching the mirror, her fingers worrying the hem of her jacket sleeve where the seam had frayed open to show white threads. I wanted to ask about the hair tie, but it felt like saying a true name, like it would make things permanent. At the first light by the loop, under that same humming halogen, she put her hand on the door handle, and I heard the click. And then, there was nobody in the seat again. The door didn't open. The lock stayed down. My truck bobbed a whisper like a boat unroped for a second. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and I might have prayed, very quietly and not the way the radio preacher wanted. I drove a loop of the frontage road and then just left town. I took Knickerbocker south, under the wide sky, past the shadow on, the water where a big bird shot across Twin Buttes. You can tell yourself daydreams get inside you. You can tell yourself sleep debt does weird things. Around sunset, I told myself I was going crazy. Then I saw her again on US 277 by Cristobal, thumb out, hair up, jacket on. Bands were practicing somewhere, snare drums echoing off metal bleachers. I pulled off before my hands made the decision and she walked to the passenger side and leaned down to the open window like we were old friends doing a routine. "Just to town," she said. "By the loop." "I know," I said. "Amy, right?" The name felt too familiar on my tongue. She blinked like I'd spoken in a language she hadn't heard in a while. "If that matters." I don't know why I did this, but I reached into the ashtray and took out the hair tie and held it toward her on my palm. "You left this." She stared at it like you'd stare at a childhood photograph found in a book you forgot you owned. "I don't think so," she said, but her voice shook like she did. It looks like." She didn't finish. She got in. We drove. The radio bled a country song for 3 seconds, then fuzz, then a ball game, Central versus Odessa, then silence. I could hear the wind now, the kind that runs out of the west forever. My knuckles were white on the wheel. At the light by the loop, same light, same buzz. She reached for the handle and disappeared the way you blow out a candle. The hair tie rolled off my palm like the truck had lost its subtle magnetism. I made the light on green and parked again at stripes like I had to do it for the ritual to be complete. Inside, the same kid had a different cap. A TV over the coffee station showed highlights from last night's game. Permian took it to them, 40-something to 20-something. In the bottom corner of the screen was a tiny ribbon for a memorial. I couldn't read. "Hey," I said to the cashier, because strangers tell strangers crazy things when they're trying to make them ordinary. "You ever hear about a hitchhiker on 87? Girl, denim jacket, hair up. Wants a ride to the loop." He made a face someone makes when they've bit a raw jalapeno. "No, sir. I mean, folks talk about weird stuff all the time. That's more a Grape Creek thing, the ghost by the tracks. My cousin says..." He stopped himself, embarrassed he'd been halfway into a ghost story in front of a grown man buying a Dr. Pepper. "You want a receipt?" It should have ended there. It should have been a one-time madness. It didn't end. Sunday morning, Bandit started barking like he does for deer. Chest deep, 4 barks, then a pause. When I looked out the kitchen window, she was standing by my cattle guard, hands in her jacket, head down, hair coming loose in little sweat curlicues around her ears. I said her name softly like I was afraid the window might shatter. She didn't look up, but I felt very strongly that she was listening. That the cottonwood leaves were her ears? That the chain on my gate was her eyes? When I stepped onto the porch, Bandit went from brave to small with a whine and slunk behind my legs. Amy lifted her face a little, like catching the first rain, and said, "Just to town." Not loud, like a wish. I drove her again because any other choice felt like ignoring a bleeding person. I took 277 north, the river a trickle off to the side, glittering like someone ran tinsel through the pecans. A herd of goats watched us pass with those flat, surprised eyes goats have. We didn't talk. My truck smelled like damp gym floor again, like lemons and ghost sweat. When we hit the first light, she went. I kept my hands firm. I didn't look at the seat because I knew what I'd see. Monday, I called my brother, who lives out past Wall and farms cotton. I asked him, very carefully, like testing a frozen pond, if he'd ever give a ride to somebody who didn't stay. He was quiet for a long breath. "You working too hard," he said at last. "You need to get out to a game Friday. Get a brisket, sandwich, say hello to normal people, it'll put your head right." He's not wrong usually, but Friday felt like 1,000 years away and my head was wired wrong now regardless. When I finally told someone else, it was Miss Deb at the post office, because Miss Deb knows everything. And she knew my mother and my grandmother and remembers when the Shell station was a Sinclair with an actual dinosaur sign. I told it sideways, like a joke, like a thing I heard. Miss Deb kept stamping and listening, and when I was done, she nodded like she'd suspected. "You're not a drinker," she said, which was a nice vote of confidence not many small-town folks extend for free. "So I'll tell you what my cousin down near Water Valley told me once. In the 70s, they had a girl get in a truck with a boy she shouldn't have. They were at the bowling alley off Sherwood. They had words. She got out before the loop and some other boy picked her up and some bad business happened. Folks talked. You know how folks talk. But," she leaned in, "there's a little cross out there by the frontage. It's not where that happened, because nobody ever admits where that happened. It's where mamas put flowers when they don't know where else to put them. Maybe that's why your girl wants the light. Maybe it's a stop sign for her that never turns green." I asked her if she thought I was crazy. Miss Deb licked an envelope. "Honey, if you are, you're in good company. And if you aren't, be kinder than you were yesterday and hope she doesn't pick you forever." Hope she doesn't pick you forever lodged somewhere uncomfortable in my chest. Because that's what it felt like. Picked. Marked. On Tuesday, I took a different route into town. I cut over on FM 12-3, then tried Old Bollinger Highway, didn't matter. On the long straight where the windmills look like red lights blinking up into space, there she was. Lean and pale and jacketed, thumb out like we were both actors in a scene nobody would admit to writing. I drove her again. At the light, she went. On Wednesday morning, I found something else on my passenger seat. A folded scrap of lined paper torn from a spiral, soft with handling. Inside, in neat block letters, was a list. Quarters, driver's permit. Jacket, ask Mom about Friday. There was a smudge on the corner like someone cried into the paper and then wiped it with the heel of their palm. I put the list with the hair tie in the ashtray and didn't tell anybody. When you carry a thing like that, it rearranges you. I started keeping my truck cleaner, like she deserved a better ride. I stocked a spare bottle of water and a pack of those peanut butter crackers you can live on in a pinch. I drove slower past the places she liked to stand. I started listening for trains. I tried to hand the note back once. Thursday, after an install over by Lakeview, she got in and we hit a string of red lights like fate was testing my patience. On the second one, I held up the paper and said, "Amy, you left this." And even as I said her name, I felt that Black Hawk shadow pass and didn't say it again. She glanced at the paper without turning her head. "I don't think so," she said. Same as the hair tie, but she watched it from the corner of her eye like someone watches a small animal they hope to pet, but don't want to spook. I asked her who she wanted to meet at the loop. That felt safe. She didn't answer the first time. When I asked again softer, she said, "I thought he'd be there." The way she said he, I knew it wasn't a father or a brother. I knew that much. Friday came anyway. I took my brother's advice and went to the Central Bobcats game with a friend. The stadium lights washed the world into bright green and big noise. You could smell brisket and damp wool jackets and the ozone-y bite of amplifiers. The band played The Horse, and some new thing I didn't know. We lost in a way that made the last 2 minutes feel like promise. On the way home late, I told myself I'd done something normal. I'd done a ritual the living do. Maybe rituals inoculate you. On the corner by Sherwood and Bryant, I had to stop for a train. The crossing arm jerked down, ding ding ding, and a slow freight rolled through like a moving fence. Tankers, graffitied boxcars, flatbeds carrying wrapped things you can never identify. As I sat there, I heard a breath next to me like somebody who'd been running finally sat down. I didn't look. I could see her in the reflection of my own window, the faint outline of a face where there shouldn't be one. I stared straight ahead, and in the glass of the storefront across the intersection, I watched my truck with 2 people in it. My heart beat in my throat like something trying to get out. "You can get out here," she said. Not a request. A gentle suggestion, like the ones you don't argue with. When the arms lifted, I turned right. Not the way I meant to go, and looped through a parking lot so I was pointed back toward the loop. There's a little patch of weeds and dirt where the shoulder widens, and in the weeds stood a white wooden cross leaning a little from the last rain, with silk flowers around it bleached by sun. I had never noticed it before, which made me feel stupid in the way that hurts. I pulled over, I put the truck in park. I didn't turn off the engine because I was afraid if it got quiet I'd hear something that would rearrange my bones. Amy didn't open the door. She put her hand on the handle. The lock stayed down. She looked at the cross, then at me, and said, very soft, "Sometimes I don't make it all the way." The words raised gooseflesh up my arms in a sheet because they were wrong and too right at the same time. What would make it all the way? I asked. My voice sounded like I'd swallowed dry cotton. If she heard me, she didn't show it. She tilted her head. "Thank you," she said. It wasn't for me, not exactly. It was for a boy in a different truck, for a mother who set silk, flowers and didn't know where else to set her hands, for the Texas wind that carries train horns like prayers and doesn't care where they land. When I blinked, the seat was empty. The cross leaned in the brassy light. A car whooshed past and flipped me the bird for stopping where you shouldn't. I reached to the ashtray without thinking and found the hair tie and the folded list and something else I hadn't put there. A photo booth strip, 4 tiny gray squares. The first showed 2 kids pressed cheek to cheek, fluorescent light carving their faces into cartoon. The second showed the girl pretending to scowl, the boy laughing. The third was just the girl, eyes closed like she'd swallowed a dare. The fourth was empty. A flash of light on nothing, like someone stood up too fast. On the bottom margin, in neat letters, was the date, September 26, 1997. I didn't sleep that night or much the next. I mowed my yard in the dark like a crazy person, just to do something loud and living. Bandit followed me with his ears flattened and tried to herd me into the light of the porch when I strayed too close to the gate. You can live with strange if it's polite. A thing happening in the same way at the same place becomes a schedule. But there are slips. On Sunday, just before dawn, I woke up certain someone was walking around the house. Not stomping, stepping, like people step when they go to the fridge in a friend's home. I sat up and listened and heard neither footsteps nor silence, but the little plastic tick of my thermostat and the whistle the wind makes at the kitchen window when it's out of the southwest. Then a voice from the hall, a girl trying not to cry, saying, "I don't want to go anymore." To nobody. I didn't get up. I said out loud, "Then don't." It felt stupid. It felt like blasphemy. The house breathed back, the way houses. To issue somewhere down by the river, a lone coyote barked at whatever the coyote gods tell them to bark at. Monday at lunch, I parked in the shade by the loop and walked out to the cross. The silk flowers were crisp and rattly, and my fingers came away with a chalky dust that smelled like dollar store roses. On the cross's beam, in Sharpie, were names and dates and little messages. Heartbreak written by teenagers trying to make permanence on cheap wood. There were hearts. There were fly highs and forever 18. There was a small bolt of lightning drawn next to a set of initials, the patch on her sleeve. I went to Hobby Lobby because it felt like the thing you do. I bought a pack of new artificial flowers that looked vaguely like the ones there. I stood by the shoulder of the road and stared at the metal version of myself in a passing car window and thought I looked like a man putting a bandage on the ocean. I tied the flowers to the cross with twine from my truck. I stuck the photo strip under the twine too because it felt like a thing that needed anchoring. When I drove away for once, I didn't look into the passenger seat. That night, nobody breathed in my truck at the crossing. No shadow face in the glass. I slept like a person who'd finally learned the trick of it. The next morning, Bandit woke me at 4, whining at the front door. Not in the way he needs to pee, in the way he needs to warn. I opened the door and there was nothing but wind and the smell of damp earth from some cloudburst that hadn't bothered to drop more than a few drops. But the gate chain swung against the post, click, 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 like a dog tag tapping a collar. I told myself we were done. I told myself ghosts, if they exist, don't have that much patience. Then a week later, driving back from a late call in Bollinger, the night crowded around again and her thumb stuck out by the mile marker like it had the first time. I slowed before I even decided to. "Just to town?" I asked, throat tight. "If that matters," she said and smiled like she was trying to learn how to do it again. We didn't talk. The radio caught the end of a preacher's hallelujah, and then the staticky middle of a Bob Wills song, then nothing. At the light by the loop, I kept my eyes on the red, and for a heartbeat I thought I could feel warmth from the space beside me, that lemony cleaner smell, her knee jittering. The light turned green and she didn't go. My heart did a bad, dangerous thing. I looked quick and she was still there, watching the cross through the windshield. "I'm trying," she said, and the way she said it was so human it hurt, like hitting your elbow on something hard. She put her hand on the handle. The lock stayed down. She didn't vanish. The light turned yellow and I eased forward because cars were behind me, and I didn't want to be a story on the radio. At the next light, she wasn't there. The seat breathed out. The cab went cold in a way that isn't the weather. Now some nights it's nothing. I drive through and it's just the hum of halogen and the rattle in my dash I keep meaning to fix and the train calling out west like it's naming old sins. Some nights I see her a mile out and I know what I'll do. Once I caught a glimpse of a girl in a denim jacket in my rear view standing by the cross in the green wash of a traffic light that, I swear, stayed green a heartbeat longer than it should. Like somebody was being allowed time they weren't owed. I don't tell many people, but I'm telling you. Not because I want you to pick her up, maybe don't. Maybe that's not what she needs from you. Maybe what she needs is with the person who let her out the first time, and with the person who never made it to the loop, and the cheap flowers, and the messages in Sharpie and a list with quarters on it in block letters that makes my throat tighten every time I see it. I keep that list in the ashtray still with the hair tie. Some weeks it sits quiet. Some weeks the corner of the paper looks wet like somebody carried it in the rain, though my truck is bone dry. Last Friday, just after the Bobcats lost by a field goal, the streets around the stadium were a snarl of pickup trucks and kids with face paint. I cut down a side road, windows open, cool air full of fried food and teenage laughter. A girl crossed in front of me with a denim jacket tied around her waist and a bolt of lightning patched on her sleeve, and the hair on my arms rose like it had a memory of its own. She looked straight ahead, oblivious. The light at the loop flashed. Yellow for construction, no red, no stop, and I took it slow anyway. At the weeds, the cross stood straight. New flowers I didn't buy brightened it. On the beam where the Sharpie hearts live, someone had written in the same neat block letters as the list, 3 words that made my mouth go dry. I made it. When I came back the next day in the sun, the words were gone. Or maybe I couldn't find them. Or maybe I'd never seen them. Maybe a truck's shadow hid them. The twine around the flowers had loosened. The photo strip had slid, the first 2 squares visible. 2 kids pressed cheek to cheek. A gust of wind lifted the edge and tucked it back like a mother fixing a collar. Tonight I'll drive home the same way I always do. I'll roll by stripes in the loop and the light that hums too loud in the wind. I'll listen for the train and the coyotes and the sound of someone breathing who isn't there. If I see her, I'll stop. If I don't, I'll count fence posts until my gate squeals and Bandit thumps his tail. And if you're out on US 87 some night near Eden, and you see a girl with a denim jacket and a little backpack and a look in her eye like she's almost remembered something important, you'll do what you do. You'll be kind if you can. Maybe. Kindness is the only road sign that matters when you've been circling a loop so long the light won't change. Maybe she'll go at the first one, or the second, or maybe she'll ride quiet all the way to the train. Either way, check your passenger seat when you get home. If there's a cheap hair tie or a soft folded list that smells faintly of lemon cleaner, don't throw it out. Put it somewhere small and important, where you keep quarters, and the receipt from a meal you shared when you didn't know it'd be your last, and the names of people you don't say out loud because voices can call things. And when you hear a voice say very soft, "Just to town," say it back the way you say a prayer to a wind that's been blowing across this flat, stubborn land longer than we've had names for it. Just to town, just to the loop. That first light is good, if that matters.